Sure. Alrighty. Yes, red means you're live. They can hear you.
Okay, we're calling this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. If we could all stand for a pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, as we don't have a chair yet, he did not run for re-election. I am the secretary, Michelle Sudet, and I will act as chair until elections are held, which will be momentarily. I do want to welcome Jim Hajar and Dan Hebert as our, and Letty as our returning member to the board. Dan, I know you just told me you didn't want printed stuff, and I can email this to you, but this is a copy of our bylaws.
Thank you.
Do you already have them?
Thank you.
And I can email those to you as well. So the first order of business on our agenda is the elections for the chair and the secretary. I would like to make a motion to nominate Jim Hajar as the chair. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kat. Any discussion?
Can you turn on your microphone? Sorry.
I actually would like to ask Michelle to take that role, and the reasons are that, well, you have been for how many years on this board, and you're very familiar with all the processes and laws and regulations. Despite how sometimes things get heated in conversations, you remain calm, and not many of us can do that. And I think I, for one, get emotional, and so does Jim, and I've seen that. And I think remaining calm and keeping order and cool-headed, and to extend, not to extend, but to remain partial, I mean, the good thing, the impartial. Sorry, I'm so tired right now. Anyways, is important. And again, not many people can do that, and I've seen you do that, and I understand how big of an ask that is, but I swear I'll type up the notes, and I'll be really good at it. I'll do that if you do that, and I'll be like 20 minutes before just to make sure that I'm ready to type, and I type fast. But that's a very important thing, I think.
I appreciate that. I don't want to take that role on. It's a bigger time commitment than I feel I can give. I am certainly willing to kick Jim under the table if it gets too emotional or out of hand.
Can he then sit a little closer?
Sure, actually, yeah, I can reach far. I just feel, honestly, he's retired. He's got a little more time on his hands to do the grunt work that the chair should be doing. And I don't want to make a commitment like that, feeling that I can't do it.
And I mean,
Thank you, but
and
no, thank
believe me, I kind of had asked Michelle to be the chair as well. And I do agree, I get passionate sometimes about, issues, but I think I've tried really hard to be a uniter and not a divider, and I'm the chair of the cemetery trustees, and I think the work that I've done on the newsletter, speaking to a bunch of different people in town and bringing that back in line. Like I said, I don't deny that there are times when I get passionate, but I think I've shown that I can lead a group and, like I said, be a uniter, not a divider, and try to really listen to people. And and that's what I would do here.
Okay, that was my only concern. And that,
No,
it's
and-
not even like in normal, like, it's not a concern in general in terms of people get
my-
baptized and it's good.
We were talking about church. My spiritual director works with me hard on pride. And I do try really hard to leave my pride at the door when I come here. This is not about Jim. It's about all of us working together for the community. So, and that's what I'm here for. And
No, I go by, I usually go like from imagining myself in different situations, and I know that I wouldn't necessarily, because that would have been my downside, like, because I can get emotional, and then, it's harder for me, right? Like, and like how much restraint it would take, essentially, but.
More baked goods?
It's gonna be a good year.
My hesitation would just be that I don't think I've ever seen a committee where somebody who is just elected becomes chair right away. So I guess I'm looking at the other people who have been here for a couple years. Why not one of you?
I can speak to that because
Okay.
I spoke with Jen a bit about running a while ago. And my concern, I think, is similar to Michelle's, that while I would be interested in doing it, I know from my conversations with Jim, he has a lot more time and just has ideas and is passionate about different things that would help. So, stay at home. I can't have a computer near. He's going to try to my falling off. Some in either other roles in other towns. And so we had a very long talk the other day, and I don't know if you want to, just kind of share any of the things. I know you persuaded me during that talk, and just how thoughtful you were about why you wanted to run for budget committee anyway, and then your thoughts on why you were like, immediately I want to take on the chair position, because I think that was very helpful. And yeah, and then also we did have a talk about one of the things I think is important for the chair to do is to be that moderating presence. Okay, things are getting really like heated. There's, when people are being maybe not so kind to others, being the one who stands up and just puts the stop to it and goes, okay, it's time to either move on, or if people are just making the same point over and over and over again, to keep us on task and on track.
yeah.
Yeah, Jim seems like he's gonna do a good job at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it is true that this is my first time on the Brentwood Municipal Budget Committee. But I think I've shown all of folks here anyways in the presentations I've done regarding municipal finance, whether go back to COVID and using the COVID money, or, on one-time revenues toward recurring expenditures, as well as given the public hearing, the tax cap. And I think I did a pretty good job of giving just an overview of, not my opinion of where I was on that, just how it worked, what the numbers would be. I think the public hearing went really well. I think people discovered the flaws that were in it, made that known. And I think what we talked about when you said about if people get heated here, and I think, yeah, the chair can control that. I mean, we're going to be respectful to each other as well as to, obviously, our community. Anyone who wants to get up and speak, they have the right to speak. And I think this committee had always done a really good job of listening and letting people speak. But there comes, questions come through the chair to, they address the board. And if people start getting long-winded, you can kind of help them, and I have some experience with that. And I think I even told you the story at cemetery trustees meeting. It did happen that somebody went after our superintendent and got a little heavy, and I kind of had to stop that, and the person didn't like it, got up and left. But that was that person's choice, because I wasn't going to let them speak rudely or inappropriately to our employee, basically. and I would do the same thing here. So I do believe I have enough experience to be, and I do have the time, and I really do. You know, I'm retired now, and I really like the finance stuff, as you know.
Yep.
So anyways,
Sorry, so just to be clear, for the 4 people that are here, I expect many people are gonna watch this later, and I know that's a question that people were asking me, so it's not.
no, I'm
necessarily
glad you,
you.
I want you to ask it. I have no problem. I'm excited to do it, and I mean, if you want me to be the chair, I would love to be.
Anyone else have any commentary or desire to put their name in the hat for this position?
No, I support Jim.
With snacks.
And snacks.
Okay, so with no other candidate, can we have a vote to select Jim as chair of the Budget Committee? All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm abstaining,
Okay.
because I still want Michelle.
Thank you. Okay.
Or should we just vote no?
You can vote no. It's
Abstain
fine.
feels better.
Okay. Are you a no or are you an abstention?
I'll just abstain.
1, 2, 3, 4.
But you can put it. I just really want, I really hope that you take that.
I do appreciate you saying that and your desire for me to do that. It's not the right time.
And to Eddie's point, just because I don't, aside from those heated conversations that we've observed, like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Sorry. We spoke maybe once, not extensively, so. Sorry, I'm just saying that I don't know Jim, like, aside from the heated commentary that came during the meetings, like, I've never actually got to know him, so it would have, you know, if it was next year and we've had that year to get to know everyone, right, like, I'd feel a little more comfortable, that's all. So that's why I really wish that Michelle could have taken that role, that's all.
Well, thank you, but Jim was just elected with a vote of 5-0-2. So, congratulations.
Thank you. So I guess the next would be we elect a secretary. Is that next step? We have any motions before I do it?
I nominate Michelle.
I'll
So
second.
Letty made the motion. Alina seconded to have Michelle as secretary. I don't have any. Is there any discussion on that?
None.
No.
Other than, thank you so much. I've read these, and I do the minutes for the cemetery trustee, but this is really, you do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I won't keep it going long. Guess we can just vote that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone oppose? Ayes have it. Congratulations, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, are the minutes for the February 10th regular Budget Committee meeting. Michelle sent them to everybody this week.
I actually do have a question on these, and I think it might have just been a matter of when we were able to reconvene. I feel like we had a really long discussion with a lot of the members of Budget Committee and Chief Byrd about why the secession plan was budgeted the way it was. Was that before we had technically reconvened? Because I do see that the time is like 9:30.
Such a long time ago.
I don't.
Um,
What is the time? That was a long night.
I don't remember.
Okay, we're just gonna then, I'm gonna assume that it was just before we reconvened. Cool.
Okay.
But again, I couldn't give you too many details about what exactly was said, and the budget passed, and so.
Yep.
Cool.
It's done deal. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the February 10th Budget Committee meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, so motion by Michelle, second by Kat to accept the minutes of the February 10th This would be the Budget Committee meeting held at the Rec Center.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone? Yeah, I'm abstaining as I was not a member at the time. So I guess Letty, you'd be the same way.
I'll also abstain.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think you
Yeah,
have
we
enough.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
403.
4-3, right?
Yep.
Okay. Next on the agenda would be the minutes for, this would be the February 10th public hearing that was held at the Rec Center. Any discussion on, oh, actually, I guess we
I'll
need
make
a
a
motion. Motion, Letty? Any
I'll second.
discussion? Second, is that Alina? Alina, second. Again, thank you. There was a lot of commentary that night, and you captured a lot of it, including myself, so thank you. Okay, so anyone else have any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of accepting the minutes of February 10th's public hearing as printed?
Aye.
And I will abstain. Again, I wasn't a member, and I wasn't paying close enough attention to, I was pretty-
very close to
I was not, I was not. So I will abstain.
I was, yeah. Just paying attention.
Okay. That. Next on the agenda is updates from the select board and then the school board. So Letty?
Yes. Would this also be a good time to give an update from another committee that I'm on?
Sure. Pertains to,
Yeah, I'm on the
Budget committee.
municipal building committee.
excellent.
And we've been talking, we just put out an RFQ, which is like an RFP, except they sell themselves to us about why we should pick them, with some engineering firms who can hopefully get us several choices. The intent is to go in front of the town next March with 2 to 3 different options so that the taxpayers can pick what they want. However, during that conversation at our last meeting, we started talking about what those numbers might be, because there was a number that came out last year that was not well researched and just not a good number. And at that point, we realized that it's likely the bond payment won't fit under the tax cap. So I've been working to try to figure out, confirm that that's accurate or not. And I guess if anyone here knows anything about that, that would be good to discuss.
So the concern would be that the first year's payment, because the tax cap grows 4% on top of the previous year's tax commit, right? So the concern
The
would be that,
tax cap, but so I know at town meeting, there was a lot of talk of just override. There is a second limit that can't be override, which
Correct.
is a 10% limit.
correct.
So if we wanted to have a bond with that payment, we would have to cut other stuff to make that payment fit.
Do we have any, and I don't know off the top of my head, do we have any bonds or payments that will be disappearing over the next few years that could help?
Hold on.
that?
I have that information somewhere. Possibly, but unlikely, just given the scale of the bond that is expected to be needed versus
Okay.
the scale of the bonds
That
we
would
currently
be
have.
disappearing. Right, it could help, but
It
we
could
would have to.
help, but I think the biggest bond that would be disappearing would be like 1/10 of what this bond could be.
Payment-wise?
Yeah.
What are you basing this on? I'm not,
So if you ask,
just rough numbers.
so there are a couple different, so the biggest thing is term of the bond. So a 15-year bond versus a 30-year bond, which just basically adds more interest, a lot more interest. So last fall, when that really inappropriate number was mentioned, we actually reached out to New
Do we
Hampshire.
remember?
Yeah, but I'm not, what is the inappropriate
Oh,
number?
we're not going to talk about it because it's just wrong. It was a bad estimate that somebody gave us.
Number for the total cost of the project or
Yep.
the, oh, okay, not the bond payment amount?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. And so we asked Municipal Bond Bank to give us some sample bond schedules for a $10 million bond, which felt like a more reasonable possibility. Keep in mind, we actually have no idea because we're not engineers. So I have for 15, 20, 25, and 30-year terms, what the payments would be. So 15 years would be $1 million for the first full payment. 20 years would be 957,000. 25 years would be 784,000, and 30 years would be 728,000. None of those numbers would fit under the 10%. So I guess that is concerning, unless there's some other mechanism I'm not aware of to quote unquote override anything to get that bond.
On the, not the 10, you're talking about not 10% rule, we're talking about the tax cap itself, that we would
We're
have to override the tax cap, or, I
will-
know we can't, the 10% is state law, so we can't change that.
So if that's true, then the only way that we would be able to get that bond on the warrant would be to cut hundreds of thousands of dollars from the current budget to balance it out. So I guess unless if I'm wrong, please somebody tell me.
I don't know if you're wrong. I guess I would have to look at, if you're saying it's $728,000 a year interest and principal,
For a 30-year bond at $10
For-
million.
yeah, for a 30-year. And if you look at this year's appropriations of like 7.2 million, and if you take out the
This year's appropriations wasn't 7.2 million.
7.2, revenues like roughly 2.2 or something like that. So say that's 5 million. You're right. 4% would be $200,000. So next
But it's
year,
not 7.2. So this is,
Okay.
I think, so I've been talking to the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and they eventually were like, we don't know because this is a new part of the law as of 2024. And I've spoken to town council to try to figure out how this will actually get executed, to try to figure out what we can do. And what everyone keeps telling me is that the 4% is calculated on the actual tax commitment, which is not 7.2.
that's correct. It's tax commitment, but which means you take the 7.2.
But it's not
Minus-
7.2 because that entire 7.2 is not going to be asked for from the taxpayers because some of it came out of unreserved fund balance. So it's
But-
actually 6.8.
But per the law in section 1A, if you look at the base amount, you add back in anything that was taken from fund balance. It's if the local taxes raised for the prior year were reduced by any fund balance brought forward
But
from
that
previous
happens-
years, that amount of reduction shall be added back and included in the amount to which the cap is applied under paragraph 1, meaning the amount you
That's-
take off, the
That's
amount you take off.
unreserved fund balance that we use in the fall to pay down the tax rate, which
Correct.
hasn't happened.
What's that?
That hasn't happened yet. I'm talking about at town meeting, a bunch of the warrant articles were amended
Yeah,
to add the phrase "to be,"
correct.
which means those don't get added back in.
But-
So it's
Well, there's $335,610 that were mandated at town meeting that have to be paid for by offset fund balance,
I agree.
right?
Again, my point is that gets subtracted before
Correct.
the appropriation. So it's
But it gets,
6.8 minus 2.2.
and then you add back the 335. That's the law.
No, you don't, is what I'm
You
telling
do.
you. No,
I know you do. Okay, we can take it offline with NHMA, but it's right in 1A, it's right in 32.5B 1A. I don't know what's unclear about it.
Because what you're talking about is money that is specifically used in the fall to buy down the tax rate.
And that's what this is.
No, it's not. It's money that has been set aside in the spring. It's different.
Okay. Well, we can talk to the town attorney then, because I'm pretty sure that whether you do it as a warrant at town meeting or whether the select board does it in October, it goes on the same, whatever that form is that we submit to the state, where you list the amount of fund balance to be used to offset taxes. And the only
Does
difference
not-
is that this $330,000 is already the town legislative body decided to use it.
Right,
And
but
the select board may or may not choose to use more in October, depending on what they want to do and how much we actually have in fund balance.
What form are you talking about specifically? Because I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same things. If it's the 737, there is a line that says voted cost items at meeting, which does not get added back in for the maximum allowable appropriations.
The form that I was referring to is just the tax, when we submit to the state to calculate the tax rate.
Yep.
It lists, each piece, obviously, but if you look under the municipal accounting overview, you have total appropriation.
Are you talking about the document that we
It doesn't have a number at the top, so I
It's just the one that
apologize.
says tax rate. After we
Correct.
set the tax rate. All right, can you
Correct.
pull it up?
Is there a way for us to,
Yes.
so we can all
I could
I was
plug in.
gonna
but-
say,
Yeah. Do you have,
I
because
have
I
none
don't
of
have
this
it.
documentation.
All right, so that is called.
Thank you.
What would I call that? Probably just tax rate report. Tax rate, tax rate, no?
No.
You have to turn the TV thing.
I will turn the TVs on. Would that be helpful?
That would be great.
Okay, cool.
no way.
I mean, I figured you could just like use your imagination, but.
It's right there.
It is in my Google Drive.
But while that's turning on, you have a legitimate concern that, how would you come up with an increase of $800,000 in a single year?
So the
because
select board wouldn't have to, is the other thing that I feel like it's important to mention to this board. In that talking to NHMA and council, since we have a municipal budget committee, the select board gets to present whatever budget they want and is up to this board to bring it below the 4%.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So
Well,
it's not,
Well, I would agree that the budget committee brings forth a budget, and we're going to live within the 4% tax cap, and obviously, because we have to do that. I suppose the select board could ignore that the town has to live within a 4% tax cap. I guess you could, but
there's
the
just
point,
no-
I'm not sure what the point would be,
Well, the-
because our budget is what
so the
gets
point
officially.
would be, for example, if the select board wanted to hire another firefighter next year,
Hmm?
or put money into the capital reserve for Wayne's trucks, that would be above the tax cap. That would be above the 4%. So the select board would be the one requesting it, and then if the budget committee decides they're not gonna fit that in the 4%, the warrant would still go forward with like a $1, so that the people at town meeting could decide if they wanna do that or not. Does that?
Oh, yeah, I guess that could make sense, sure.
Yeah, but that's why the select board has to present the budget that they want.
Okay.
So that people have the two numbers to look at. You're talking about the 2024.
Or there could be I guess you could do warrants as well, but again, the total wouldn't be able to add up over.
Warrants count towards it.
I know they do, correct, yeah.
Which is why the number that you present, which is the official
It always-
number, right? The official budget number comes from the budget committee,
Correct,
has to be under the 4%.
correct.
Means even if we have warrant articles that everyone even all the people on this board agree with, you still would not be able to recommend them, I guess. You would have
Well,
to.
I would suppose that our board would have to discuss warrants and determine, well, if we're going to accept this warrant, well, then there's going to have to be an appropriation or something. We have to, the total of appropriations and warrant would have to be within the 4% rule, correct?
Yes, what I'm saying is there has to be some mechanism for the public to know that the select board wanted a different number and that the budget committee cut it down. So that if the public at the town meeting was like, you know what, we want to go over the 4% to do whatever the thing is. No, it should just work. It should just be plug and play unless you.
It's always just work.
Oops, no, it's his computer. All right, so I'm looking at.
So whatever you have on your screen.
I'm looking at the 2024 tax setting document.
That's what I was going by. And it doesn't have, I think I got this either from you or Jack at the time. It just says. Sure. I'll get it to Michelle so she can put it in in a minute.
So I'm seeing total appropriations 6.683 million.
There you go, yes.
I thought you said it was 7.2.
This is last year.
Okay, just checking. So where does it say that we're adding back in what the people voted to do at town meeting?
Well, now I would have to bring up 32.5B 1-A. If you'd like, I can put that up.
No, you said that it was on this document. That's why we mentioned this document specifically.
No, I'm sorry, I'm confused by you're saying there's a difference between what the select board determines to use in this line right here that says fund balance to reduce taxes,
Yes.
$870,064.
Yes.
That there's a difference between that and what was done at town meeting, the $335,000.
Yes.
I don't know what the difference is. I believe it's fund balance that is going to be used to reduce the appropriations.
Before we appropriate it, though. So imagine that I borrowed $20 from you.
Make it clearer. We got a loader. There was a warrant for a loader for a specific amount, $165,000.
I'm not going to ask you in the fall for that money because before I give you money back that is left over from this year, I'm going to keep it. So I'm never going to ask you for it.
I think when you set the tax rate this year, the appropriations will list the amount that you paid for the loader.
No,
and,
they won't.
and in this line, you will have the same amount.
Can I think I get what you're saying. So basically, the total appropriations are going to be, in that first line under description, are going to be less the amount of what's being paid out of the fund balance. So it's going to be
Less.
it's not going to show up on either side of the equation. So say it was, I don't remember the exact amount,
Because we
but
never are going to
rather than it being 68 or 6,000,008, I can't read that from here. I didn't wear my glasses.
What is
whatever. Yeah, it would say,
What is another year that we used fund balance to pay for something? Do you know, off the top of your head? No. No.
yes. And it won't show up in appropriations either.
You're saying this number is the select board's decision that was voted on at the end
That will be voted on in.
after
Yes.
the tax rate is
Mhm.
calculated,
It's part of calculating the tax rate.
or within the tax rate.
Yes, so typically the way it works is the select board would get a sheet with, if we pay this much in fund balance to reduce taxes, the tax rate will be this. It, gives all the choices. So that is a number that's chosen by the select board to.
So have we had, is that what you're asking, have we had another year where we decide specifically?
So
on
yes,
articles?
we have. And so this is the example that I used, and that's why I'm trying to figure out. because it seems like you have a different perspective, and I'm just trying to
On
understand what the
this,
truth is.
on what you're saying here, I don't have the answer to what you're saying. I don't know for sure
Right.
how you account for warrants that say to be paid for from fund balance versus, again, I don't have that answer.
should we
I would
pause?
ask, the town administrator may have experience, because I believe in Candia, I had seen their town reports that they did this a lot. Maybe she knows. If not, I don't, yeah, and if, I would think New Hampshire DRA, I could call them and ask them as well, how we account for. I think it's weird that it wouldn't, that the appropriation just isn't listed somewhere, that it's kind of like gone.
Well, it's
but-
not gone. We prepaid for it.
I know, but there wouldn't be an accounting for it in the 2025 fiscal year. I don't know where it shows up.
We already paid for it in 2024 money, so it doesn't show up in 2025.
But we paid for it with fund balance, which was saved up from many years, right? It doesn't, it's not just 2024.
mean,
It was, that's what I'm
You
saying.
can't
Like
say
that,
it's the same, I mean,
but there was a,
so,
and I guess the whole reason why we put this up, I mean, that,
If I may, just for a second, I think we're not going to solve it here right now. Jim, to ladies, I point municipal accounting sometimes is weird, and I'm an accountant, and sometimes it doesn't make any sense to me. And so I think probably what's important is to put an open item on the list to make sure that we get to the bottom of what will or will not and how exactly it's accounted for, right?
how it's accounted for, what number we're calculating to
Right.
snap off of, because, actually, Jim, if you scroll back up, based on all the conversations I've had with all the people, that net required local tax effort, that 3.9 million, is what the 4% will be on.
add the 870 on top of it.
Assuming there is 870 in the fall.
Correct.
Adding the 870, but not adding the 300 some odd that we approved at town meeting this spring.
Correct. So when we do the 2026 budget,
Mhm.
you would take, when we fill this sheet out for 2025, right?
Mhm.
It'll show the local tax effort right there. You just add back whatever is used in fund balance. You always add back the fund
Right,
balance
but
offset.
yes, so
And that's the base.
the
You are
net,
correct.
so
That's
the
the base.
net is the total appropriation minus revenue then.
Correct. 100% correct. That's what
Which is a
that's-
different number for me than it is for you, which is why,
I don't know what you mean by different.
well, because you have the stuff that was appropriated last year in your number and I do not. Which is again why it's important to know, because that extra couple $100,000 could make a difference, is going to make a difference in the tax cap.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I could see that we have different would be if all of those warrants that are paid for by fund balance, I'm listing them as appropriations, but
They're
you're
not.
saying they're not.
Mm-mm.
Right. But I believe I was listing them as an appropriation, and then we would add back the 335, but, so I'm thinking it offsets, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it's a great question. I think you're right. We need an answer on that. I don't know.
But it was your understanding that they got added back in.
My understanding is strictly on fund balance offset, that number right there, that 870. Whatever we use, whatever we report to the state, if we used any fund balance to offset taxes, which means you bring down the
Yeah,
tax
no,
impact,
I was there
you,
last year,
you,
I did
you,
it.
you add it back in.
I know.
It does not count against us to
But I'm
use
talking
fund
about a
balance.
different pile of money, and I think it's gonna be super important to understand how that works moving forward, because I think it's going to drastically change how the town uses fund balance to fund warrant articles moving forward. So like, for example, if it doesn't count towards next year's total, then we're gonna have to raise a new $150,000 to add to the highway vehicles capital reserve. Because last year's was funded out of the unreserved fund balance.
Yeah, I would think that's true, yes.
Sure, well, but you were
It
just
would be
saying
true
you have a
anyways.
couple $100,000 in the 4%, that all of a sudden 150 is gone.
No, no. Again, there's a lot of numbers being thrown here.
Mm-hmm.
When I said 200,000, I was just taking 4% of basically what the appropriations minus 2.2 million, it comes out to be $200,000. That's 4%.
Right, but if
That's
we're
it.
already, so for example, if the select board was like, yeah, we still need to save for plow trucks every year, we need to ask for another $150,000 this year, that's already coming out of that $200,000.
I have a question also. Do warrant articles that are worded that way, that it comes out of an unapplied or unreserved fund balance, does that still fall under the tax cap? Or does this make it different in some way?
So
Since they
You need an answer.
technically doesn't go towards appropriations.
it doesn't, so
Yeah, that's a good
it would
question.
not be
I don't know.
so
Well,
are you
it's still
talking
an
about for
expenditure.
20, it's an expenditure, but it's not an effort. Because we're
But
not
it's just-
asking you for more
it's-
money.
It's right, but and I think like we're gonna have to close this and get council or HRA. But it seems like you would think, which I know this never is the legal actual rules, but you would think that any expenditures would be included in appropriations, and the source of funding is either tax revenue, unreserved fund balance, etc. And so it has to be somewhere in one of those lines. Like, it doesn't make sense that it would disappear.
It's not that it disappears, and I'm trying to think of so when you pay for something out of unreserved fund balance, it does not have an additional tax impact because that is tax money we've already collected from you. It's not new. So it wouldn't be part of the new appropriation because we're not taking it from you. We already have it.
Commitment.
Yeah.
But that's,
Isn't that-
that's,
Right.
yeah, the law says the tax cap refers to tax commitment, but I agree with Letty, that's that number right there. That says net required local tax effort. That is the tax commitment. That is it.
Right. So
So it's what category it falls under.
it doesn't fall under this anywhere.
Okay.
Because we're not, so appropriation means I would like you to give me money. We're not asking for money. Like the thing that's always, the thing that's always comes up is like, it's not, we can't say it's not a tax impact because it does impact the
Right.
taxes because it doesn't get returned to you otherwise.
Right.
But it is no new taxes, no new impact. So I think we need to figure this out.
I'm
But also, it's irrelevant because a bond won't fit under the cap either way with the 10%. So I'm not sure.
At least with this year, the 353,000, I don't think is going to make a huge difference. But
what we need to, I think there needs to be time spent on how do you get, because if you can get it to work the first year, you'd be okay years after that, because I believe the payment schedule is the same every year, isn't it?
No, it goes down every year. Well,
Okay, so
we can pick if we want level total payment or level principal, which would make the total payment
Okay.
go down every year.
well, the way the tax cap works is, it's 4% every year, 4% on top of every year, every
Yes.
year. So obviously up front, it's going to be more difficult, right, to get it to work in the first year. I agree with
think
you.
The committee is wondering why we work hard to get it to town meeting in front of the voters in March if it can't physically be approved by the voters.
right, and I think the point of the cap is that it seems like the voters don't want a huge thing. They want us to prioritize. If we want to police a municipal building, well, then we're going to have to figure out what we can't have. Right? Like, that's the point of the cap.
Absolutely. However, I think the select board is gonna have to think about what that looks like to cut $800,000 from the budget. Like, where is that gonna come from?
Right. That's a good question.
Right, so I guess that's why I'm saying this board and the select board, if all of these things that are still a little murky are true, then the select board and this committee are gonna have to figure out what they're cutting to get a police
Mhm.
station. It's not just not increasing other things,
Yeah.
it's actively cutting them.
Yeah.
And I think there are only a couple of budgets, which then wouldn't require municipal building to begin with. Anyways, I think we gotta table that because first
sorry,
step
I-
would be to understand the calculation exactly right and go from
I,
there.
I definitely
But
noted,
I think I also misunderstood the original point, and I think now I do, is the point is that there's that committee of people that devote a lot of time right now towards working on, presenting a project, and it takes a lot of commitment.
Well,
And
and
the
money,
question,
we're spending money on we're spending.
right,
money
and
on
we're
it.
spending money, the town is spending money, and the question is whether or not it's a waste at this point, because if we're not gonna be able to do it in the next, let's say, 10 years or something, right, then, so I think that
Or if we're not
understanding
gonna
how
be
it's
able to
gonna
do it,
work,
then we need to.
right, understanding all
figure-
the rules and the calculation, and then going from there, maybe we could have a separate meeting with the board, with the select board on that as well, just to put our heads together and figure out with the council, right, if it's feasible or not and what's feasible, and then.
So Jim, is that something that you as budget committee chair would find out?
I absolutely have down that the one thing that I've noted is how do we account for warrants that are paid and funded by fund reserve, fund balance, and then and its impact on the tax cap. I have that listed as an action item to come back to our group. Is
I
there
just wanna-
something more or?
Well, yes, I want to confirm that there is no way to override this 10% limit.
There's no way to override the 10% above what the budget committee approves.
Yes,
Okay. I think I know the answer, but I will confirm that.
because that would be where we would fund a bond. Because the budget committee can't present something more than 4%, so they can't approve the bond payment.
But if the budget committee approves a budget that includes a new big building like that, you're not, right? It's not going over the budget committee's budget would be acceptable, and you wouldn't be even dealing with an override of the 10% rule.
So what I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the 4% is that like $250,000. A bond payment would be over $700,000, which means that this committee would have to cut $500,000 out of the operating budget and warrant articles to fit under that tax cap.
Not including revenue growth, that's correct.
Oh, okay. That's.
So if the revenue went up $200,000, if the revenue goes up $200,000 in the year, that's $200,000 more that you can spend within the tax cap.
But we won't know what the revenue is when we approve the budget.
That's correct.
So that's the part that feels
We vote,
like we don't know what's gonna happen, and I've been up to my armpits in the budget, and there isn't an extra $500,000 to cut unless you're gonna start cutting police officers or firefighters. So I understand that's my opinion, and y'all can.
no, it's not,
swim
it's
in
not
yourselves.
an opinion. I don't know, like, how any of us can comment. I mean, the people voted a 4% tax cap. I think that we definitely have a question on what is the 4%? How do you calculate, and what number do you use for the 4%, the base? And I know that I know fund balance offset, that money gets added back in, but it does, again, the warrants. So I will find out, because that is a
I think
deal.
it's the 10% thing that's catching us, because if we didn't have the bond, it wouldn't be an
But
issue.
I-
Because of the last 10 years, the only times it's hit that 10% was years that we had a bond. So it would have been like that one.
Can we?
Yeah,
please-
I'll look into 3218, which is
Yep.
the 10% rule.
Yeah.
And I'll get a ruling on how that exactly works, and if it's possible for a municipality in any way to go over that 10% rule.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
So my understanding is that it is not, based on the 737, which literally has a maximum allowable appropriations portion, which is that 10%. So if you have other information or know other things, please tell me. I have spoken to a lot of people who are very excited about giving the police station a non-wet, moldy home. This idea that we could just override the tax cap, I think, is true. the tax cap, the 4%, up to a point. And I think that,
Yeah, I
Um,
thought it was up to the 10% rule is what I thought, but
okay.
I
and
will
so you-
check that for sure.
No, well, if you think that that's also true, then then that's probably it then. And that just means that you're gonna have to
I,
figure out how to.
I had no doubt that our committee would have to really this year look at prioritizing and strategically thinking about, like, looking at 3 to 5 years. What are we going to invest in this year? What are we going to invest in the year after? I think that's a good thing to do anyways, but for sure, now that there's been a tax cap implemented, I think that makes it even more imperative to do that, no doubt, for the reasons that you're saying.
Absolutely, but
We can't do everything for
we're not
everybody in
talking
the same
about-
year.
We're not talking about holding everything else level and only making increases in certain places. There will have to be cuts in other places, and that's the thing that I don't feel great about, because we've worked really hard to get the staff we have.
I guess I don't know what else to say on this issue, other than I look forward to seeing more details on, you're saying $10 million. I don't know what that, is that, I guess we have to see what these 3 different views look like. But you're right, for sure, I'm glad that people are looking at what's the financial implication going to be on bonds when we do that.
Yeah, just for anyone that's wondering, it's based on the new Northampton Public Safety Complex that was completed like a year and a half ago. That's a combined police and fire station. It's about the size that we'd be looking to build without, obviously, the big garage for fire trucks.
I think the sooner we get to the bottom of what is possible, what not, because if it's not possible, and if both communities determine that it's not possible for a number of years, for whatever reasons, then we shouldn't be wasting money or people's time.
Yeah, no, yep. Yeah, so the next building committee meeting is the 6th. Yeah, May 6th at 1:30. So do you think there's any chance you might have an answer to that before then?
What's the meeting date?
May 6th at 1:30?
I would think so.
Okay.
Sure. I have a contact at DRA. I'll talk to him. And I worked with someone at NHMA already when I was doing the preparation work for the tax cap, so-
I already have a long email chain with NHMA, and they basically said, we can't help you anymore. Your financial questions are too many
Well, that's
for
good.
us."
I'll try. We were a member, aren't we, Brentwood?
They don't have a financial director right now, so the only person
Okay.
you talk to would be a lawyer, and I've already talked to him. I can forward you my back and forth, if that would be helpful.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Did you talk to DRA at all?
I've left several messages. Kat has
Okay.
not called me back.
There's a person that I've dealt with. He's been really responsive, so I'll try that. But
Okay. Hopefully, maybe you'll get an answer. That would be lovely.
I definitely don't think anybody should stop what they're doing at this point. I don't think that would be wise. I think it's smart to continue going forward, to let the people know the options, what it will cost, because I do think that the police need a new building. I think that's something that people have known for quite some time. But I know you said there are options, so I think people need to see what
Well,
are
we're
the
hoping
options
for
and
the
how much it's
options.
going to
That's what
cost.
we're going to pay engineers to tell us.
Right. And I think, I don't think somebody should say, well, there's a tax cap in Brentwood, we're not going to do that. I think that'd be foolish, actually.
So my concern with that is that if we just do it for interest of it, like if you get a quote right now, like let's say you're remodeling, I don't know, a bathroom, just talking out of personal experience. No, I considered it, and we're not going to do it for that very reason.
Yeah, it's hard.
But if you get quotes right now, and then let's say you say, oh, gee, I'm not going to be able to afford it for next X years, then in X years, that quote is not going to be valid. So I guess if we're spending money on getting those quotes and we're spending money, a significant amount of money, it's not like, it's not for free, then that's the question. So if we get the answers and we calculate and realize that in the in foreseeable future we cannot actually physically do it, then I would probably rather put a stop to what's happening and put a hold, right, and do that later when we're actually going to be ready as a town to proceed.
Feels like the chicken or the egg. Like we need some information to make the
Right.
decision.
But it's going to be at least that, like, you look at the similar projects, right, and 10 million is not, think about houses right now and what it takes to build a house, you're building a station. Like, 10 million is fairly reasonable that it's gonna be at least that. And if it's that, and we can't afford it, and let's say there's no way around it, then we're wasting time and
Right.
resources.
But if 10 million is the highest, then there could be options that could work.
Yeah, but we won't know, right? Like,
But
we
we
won't
won't
know
know.
until we spend the money.
And we already approved, like, the voters already approved the dollars to get the engineering.
Yeah, but they haven't been spent yet. So to Alina's point, if we're not gonna be able to get the project up and running, maybe we wait and have the RFQ next year.
How much was the engineering cost?
It's like 150, 160,000.
When's it scheduled to be? You still are getting the proposal RFPs, right?
Yeah, I think they're due May 30th, maybe?
Okay, so we should have an answer from PRA potentially by your next.
From
meeting,
whoever.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think
By
that's
May
realistic.
6th.
I think that's realistic.
And you would, the RFPs would have to be back by May 30th, right? So we have 6 weeks, 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we could also work in the other direction if we get confirmation that this works, about how it works, I guess.
Right.
We could figure out what payment we can afford
Correct. Correct.
and then figure out how much.
Invert that to like the total spent.
I totally agree with that, which is why I'm saying I don't think we should stop.
But
the
then
committee, I
we
mean-
know what other things you might balance out that payment with in the existing budget. Or if you're saying that that payment would be on top of the existing budget.
It seems like there's lots of support to get the police out of the basement. So I feel like from that perspective, the show must go on, as they say.
The greatest show.
Let's do step by step, though. Let's get the calculations.
Right.
And then figure
Yeah,
out
if somebody,
what's next.
if you are able to find somebody that can tell us how to calculate this, like literally step by step, that would be great, because nobody has been able to tell me.
Like, I'd be all for meeting on the 5th
Yes.
and discussing it further if there's some news or whatever. And
How to
down.
calculate, I just want to make sure you're specific with me on what you want to calculate.
Well, it's
How
not
to-
me. This board is gonna have to present a budget that's under 4% of a number that we're not sure what it is.
Correct. And I'm pretty sure I have that listed. The only thing I am aware of that we don't know how to account for are warrants that are funded to be paid for by fund reserve. There's definitely, none of us seem to know how that works, and that definitely would have an
And you
impact.
and you also feel confident that the 10% rule is the 10% rule, and there's.
I am positive that the 10% rule, the tax cap it clearly says it does not affect the legislative body's ability to the legislative body may override the cap by usual procedures applicable to annual meetings and deliberative sessions of the legislative body. The provisions of this section shall not limit the legislative body's authority to increase or decrease the amount of any appropriation or the total amount of all appropriations. And what the attorney and DRA told me was, yeah, you can
The
vote.
town attorney, town
No,
council?
no, this is NHMA.
Oh.
Said that the town can vote to on any given year, override the tax cap, but they cannot override the 10% rule. And the 10% rule has to do with the approved budget committee budget, less fixed expenses.
Were you here, we've had to do that one time since I've lived here for school board, so I don't know if you were here when we had to do that. It was unpleasant.
But again, so the 10% rule is not the total recommended budget by the budget committee. It's a total budget recommended by the budget committee, less fixed expenses, meaning any bond or interest payments. Those are not counted in the budget. So the 10% rule does not apply on those.
Does the 4% apply to those?
Yes. Because the 4% is based on tax
So the
impact.
10% isn't even really 10%.
So then, is this a moot point?
No, it's not.
He's talking about
Bond?
Why don't I just I'll put a summary together for us on,
Yeah.
I definitely need an answer on the warrants. I got to get that. But I will put a summary together to us on how the 10% rule works and make sure it's approved by the NHMA attorney as well as DRA. That's pretty easy to do. I'll do that for the group for our next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually
I don't know, this side of the room's really cold.
Not this corner.
Not that seat.
That door is drafty.
So there,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that without all of this information, we're gonna make any like real.
oh yeah, no, so
Yeah,
I've been bringing this up, like I brought this up to the select, or this came up to the select board, this came up at that other committee, and they're like,
Oh,
it's budget
afford
stuff.
these.
And so this is the first committee that
Thanks.
really is gonna have anything to do with.
Oh, sorry.
Did you bake those? Wow.
I really
Oh, they
did. I will
smell
have a
so
second one.
good.
Marty doesn't let me eat during the day.
Kids eat early, so I eat early.
My baby doesn't let me eat.
So
Unless she
did you have, not to interrupt.
No, I was
if
just gonna
that's
ask, is
done,
that-
yeah, did you have anything else? Because if you don't, I have a question for select.
For me.
Yeah. Not to do with this discussion.
I don't think so, because we haven't talked about, any budget stuff yet. The only thing I can tell you as me, one person on the select board, is that I am intending to once again request final budgets much earlier so that we can see what the total bottom line is a lot sooner in the process. I think that worked really well last year, because it gave us some perspective as we were going through. I think that's it.
Okay, well then I wanted to ask, I haven't watched the selectmen's meetings, but was under the impression we had hired somebody to do something about a reconciliation, but then somebody else said something about an audit, so I'm just trying to understand what this outside hire is doing, please.
So we do an audit every year.
Mm-hmm.
That is a separate thing.
Right.
It hasn't happened yet this year. One of the things the auditors need to check are all of the accounts to make sure that what is in BMSI, which is our on-site software, matches what the bank account says we should have in all of the categories that we have them in.
Mhm.
Those reconciliations have not been done since December 23, January 24. So the board authorized hiring somebody to do that ahead of the audit. Because otherwise, there could be a situation where in our system, it says that we have $50,000 in the capital reserve fund for a highway vehicle, but the bank account says we have $4,000 in that capital reserve fund, or vice versa. Does that answer your question?
So in other words, the accounting side of accounting hasn't been done since January 2024-ish.
Not being an accountant, my rough answer to that would be yes.
It's not just reconciliation.
It's
Um,
not?
It's not. You would have been able to reconcile if the transactions were there.
Well,
Weren't we paying somebody to reconcile during
So
that time?
it was being outsourced through January of 24, December of 23. It was being outsourced to MRI, somebody through MRI who was coming in some number of hours a week or month. That relationship was terminated in early 24, and it is not clear what then happened. And people who might know are no longer with the town. So we're just trying to kind of start fresh in 25, hopefully.
just to note that that did show up in an audit report a few years ago when I was reviewing stuff before, or at the beginning of joining the board. It was a question I had, and I think it just got passed. It was like within the discussion of our accounting system conversations, getting a new accounting system, what it would mean to maybe change the financial year to match up with the school, et cetera, on and on and on. And it just seemed like the conversations we had was everything was so busy and we're so understaffed that it just didn't go anywhere. So it
So
seems
what you're saying is the town has known about this for several years.
yes.
Cool.
But it's also been there, like in the public, like it's been publicly printed. because
Well,
you know, the audit report
I'm gonna
is
be honest.
available in
I've
the town
probably
report.
read the audit report, and I have no idea what most of it means. So
My background is in auditing, so I specifically went right to the audit report.
that's
This
very
was,
exciting.
this was brought up a number of times, and this was brought up before you joined the board as well. And there was quite a bit of pushback at the time from the people involved that no longer necessarily here.
And honestly, I don't know when who was hired or when they start. Is it under Ambrose's is it another third party?
Sorry.
I specifically asked the question while you were taking a bite.
So the other thing is that the checks are printed separately, so there are different systems. So I, for example, never question, I don't have a high level of confidence that when the checks are reviewed by the select board and the previous select boards, they are reviewed against the invoices. There's check and balance in terms of where the money goes. The issue is that right. So the issue is that there's an accounting system that is quite ancient, and that accounting system is separate from everything else. So the treasurer is responsible for ensuring that, you know, there's no fraudulent activity, and then the checks are issued to the parties that they need to be issued. But the accounting itself needs to be reported to, you know, the town and the auditors and various authorities, that accounting was happening in a different system, and that accounting has not been happening properly. So there's, you know, and when the questions were raised or asked, it was difficult to get to the bottom of it. So when, you know, when you brought up that again, you remember kind of didn't go anywhere, right? And I guess now I'm not surprised. Because that answers it exactly, that, okay, the accounting side has not been happening, and it's a lot of work. It's a big undertaking. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
There was a question somebody asked me when my mouth was full. What was it?
When is that work going to start?
The work to get 24 cleaned up?
Yes.
My understanding is that it has already started.
Okay, great.
The challenge we are currently facing is we're not entirely sure who is going to do it going forward.
Okay. I was curious about who's managing that project.
I
Does it
assume
fall under
the town
Ambrose
administrator would
and
be,
Andrea?
I believe Andrea,
Okay.
but we haven't had an update because our meeting, we're at every other week now, so.
Okay.
And part of it is that we really do, and that's also like a different discussion for a different day and time, but we do need a different system that would actually allow the treasurer and the rest, and then tax collector and everybody else to use the system that is then going to use that and like go into, you know, because you're double doing it otherwise. But those systems are complex and expensive. So
Or
we
you
kind
need
of
a
missed the
person
bus
who's
in
in
that
charge
a
of
while back.
finance.
Huh?
Or you need the person, or you need to hire
You
someone.
need that anyways,
both.
right? But
Well,
that's right. But
add it to
that's
the list
also
of things
very
we should do.
expensive. Like if we're essentially, if we look at our town as a business, right? And it's a big enterprise. We're running it without an account, like a competent finance person. So there's no finance person, and it's not treasurer's job. So it is very concerning. But even if we could start with getting a system, and let's say, you know, so that all that information, the revenues, the, you know, all sorts of collections, right, taxes and expenditures, will at least end up in the same place automatically, that would have been great, right? Because, but we don't have that, and that's a very big project. So I think that it's good that we got the person to at least reconcile 2024.
Until we have to do, I mean, it would be better to do it as we go as opposed to have to clean it up after the.
So have they given any, you know, understanding on how long it might take them and how many resources, or is it just one person, or is it a
One
company? Okay.
And we also don't know, I mean, when she gets into it, we have no idea how much
What it's gonna
untangling
look
she's gonna
like.
have to do, so.
Right. I'm kind of curious about that.
I'm sure you could come hang out.
I know. I'm like hesitant to say.
Go talk to Andrea,
Okay.
and that will better tell you, because I only know kind of what she's been
Right,
telling
right,
us
right,
about
right.
what's happening and what we've approved to expend money on.
Okay. Yeah, I'll reach out. I'll put that in my- Cool.
Does that answer your question, Michelle?
Yes,
Are you sure? You have any other ones?
probably.
Okay, I'll be right here if you think of them.
Thank you.
That's it.
You sure?
Well, no, but that's all I could, that's all I'm doing for tonight. How about that?
Thank you. Thank you for the report and the excellent questions. I mean, it was
We
really
have to
good.
figure it out. Like,
Absolutely.
it's not about what's
absolutely.
right and wrong.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Anything from the school?
Yeah, I did prepare a few notes just because this is my first meeting, so I figured maybe cast a wide net, and then you all can help me become more targeted with what updates are helpful as we move forward here. So I just had 5 quick bullet points. Number 1 is just about the school board and the school organizationally. It's essentially identical to last year. There was 1 open school board seat. Dr. Kate Bonafide was reelected. So the school board is identical. Brian Duffy's continuing to serve as chair. I'm now here with you all, collaborating with the budget committee, which I'm pumped about. And Megan Fitzgerald is continuing to be the vice chair of the school board. Principal Ron Q is going on nearly 10 years now, going solid, which is great, and claps for that. We'll have a new superintendent at SAU 16, as Dr. Esther Aspel's retiring, and Chris Andriski will be the new superintendent. He's currently the assistant superintendent. More claps for that one for sure. And my second point is just around the Swayze school budget. As you all know, we passed that thanks to the voters in Brentwood on March 1st. So thank you very much. The solar panel project, which I know many of you have been involved in, probably more so than myself, coming into it a little bit later, just with this being my 13th month on the school board. But the solar panels are now active and they're generating power, and in the coming months we'll have more specific reporting on what that actually means, you know, as far as financials and the power generated and that sort of thing. Fourth point is around academic performance. I won't bore you all with too much, you know, iReady diagnostic data, or unless you want me to, I certainly can. But beginning of year to middle of year assessments continued to show growth in both math and reading that exceeds local SAU norms, national norms, state norms. So the students are doing awesome, which has been the case for many years now. So that's most importantly. And then fifth and final point that I jotted down was just around some things that are happening in Concord that could increase costs for schools both in Brentwood and across the state. So number 1 is around open enrollment. So open enrollment was bundled into the overall budget bill that passed the House on April 10th and is now before the Senate. And basically the open enrollment provision, just building awareness here, requires that schools accept students from other districts, other schools across the state, and to do so at 80% of the average per pupil cost of the sending district. So if the receiving school's cost per pupil is greater than 80% of the sending schools, then the receiving school's expenses will increase. And there's a large amount of monthly reporting requirements as well that would be entirely new for schools and districts that come at a cost as well. So that one's been passed by the House and is now before the Senate. And then the second bill or provision that could potentially increase costs for schools, both in Brentwood and across the state, has to do with health benefits and insurance. And I'm not sure if this is related to town employees as well, but we use Health Trust for our benefits and health insurance. And basically, there's pooled risk with Health Trust. That pooled risk, if Health Trust goes, insolvent, or if this passes, the risk would be passed on to the schools and to the towns, anyone who's insured through Health Trust. So basically what the bill is requiring is that towns or schools have to pay, are required to pay into Health Trust stabilization funds. And so,
Like a self-insurance?
yeah, Letty, go ahead. I feel
So
like
the
you've
other
got more
thing-
backstory.
Yeah, the other thing that's, since that, I don't know when your meeting was, Health Trust has actually said if this bill passes, they will cease to exist. They have decided to just pull out, which would mean that we would need to find new insurance.
So
And
I
it's a
only bring
tight
this up,
timeline to
and
do
I have
that, too, I believe.
no idea. However, I used to audit hospitals who would self-insure. And I'm curious if there is any discussion, and I can go look at this, and it might be at a state level or at district levels.
When you say self-insure, pretend I don't know anything about insurance and tell me what that means.
It means that you, like at the hospital level, you would create your own plans. And so instead of paying into an insurance, like Health Trust, you would kind of like,
Does it make sense
Spin
to
up
do
your
that
own.
with 20 employees?
no, I mean like it likely would have to be across districts or across the state, like the New Hampshire education.
So we did that and it's called Health Trust.
I get it. I'm just saying with the paying into a stabilization fund sounds similar to self-insuring.
No, so the paying into the stabilization fund basically means that and I might get some of this wrong and I apologize because I'm just searching my brain. The legislature feels as though Health Trust was not holding enough in case of whatever. So they would like to require that Health Trust hold more, which would mean that either the districts or the
Right.
schools would have to create on our side, just in case fund, or we'd have to give them more money,
Right.
which they have decided that they don't want to have to deal with because they already take a lot of our money.
Yeah. Just curious.
So I think December 31st is when they said that they would just,
Yeah,
Right.
so it would be a
They dip
tight
out,
timeline
yeah.
for both school board and.
Do you know how many districts use this Health Trust insurance group in
I
New
think
Hampshire?
almost all of the state between school districts and towns use Health Trust.
So pretty much all the municipal entities and schools in New Hampshire use this?
Definitely the smaller ones. I'm not sure about the bigger ones, but the reason this works for the smaller ones is because it is pooled risk. So
Yes. I'm
But
just
we wouldn't
asking
typ-
because,
like, nobody would typically want to take on
yeah.
our tiny little risk pool by itself.
I mean, small businesses do it, but yeah, I agree. The bigger the pool, the better. I was just asking because it sounds like this would impact a lot of people, not just Brentwood.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think there's a presentation. I have to look. I think they're giving a presentation on it.
So it takes at least 3 months to get any quotes, and then we need another like 3 months normally, right? Like to, even if plan is selected, so that's 6 months, so that leaves everyone couple of months to figure out plan B if that happens, right? Am I understanding it correctly? At least for the town. We are not, obviously, we don't have any
So I don't-
over the
so yeah,
schools,
so-
so for the town employees.
So for the town employees, I don't know what we would do because in the employee handbook, we're required to offer 3 different health insurance plans.
No, I understand that. So like, what I'm saying is
So-
that to get quotes, should we perhaps as, request that, similarly to what was done before a committee was formed and, but it didn't go anywhere, but right now, having that as a risk.
Are you
um,
volunteering
right.
to run that committee?
I mean, if there's a risk of losing it on December 31st without any plan B, then sure,
Okay.
we have to have a plan B
No,
and we
I
have to
don't
have it like
disagree, but
solid, right?
I'm not gonna be able to. And I guess you could talk to Andrea because she's HR.
Okay,
So I don't know if she's been working on anything.
yeah.
Um,
I'm just concerned that December 31st our town meetings in March. And if that happens and our employees don't have insurance for 3 months, what does it mean and how
Well,
town
they
can
could still
get
have
penalized if?
insurance. They could still have insurance. We would just, assuming that the bill gets passed to start whenever, they would let us know maybe in the summer that they're, like, we will have a little bit of time between, assuming this happens, between when we find out about it and when we lose insurance, but it's still gonna be tight.
Do we know when the decision, when it's scheduled
When the
to?
legislature decides. Let me see. See where it is.
Yeah, it's passed the Senate in late
And then for
March,
schools, the
and
renewal
now
is
it's
in
before the
July,
voters.
right?
Yeah. So they'd be,
Yeah.
Do you have a bill number?
worse shape.
SB 297.
I
Thank
just
you.
Texted a link to you, Jim.
Thank you.
I just found the packet
Oh, thank you.
for it.
Thanks.
Anybody else wants it?
So, yep, so that's,
It's very much so on the radar of
I
the
forgot.
SAU and for us in Brentwood, so I figured mention it here because I thought there might be some crossover with the town as well. So at
No,
least-
thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like it.
Is it my recollection that Health Trust is the only game in the state for this?
that was my understanding. I have not done research to confirm that. But that was my understanding from that other time there was a committee on this.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but why can't we just go through just a regular insurance?
So I'm gonna be 100% honest, I don't really understand how the administration side of insurance works. I have to imagine the fact that we have such a small pool of people is working against us for that. Right, because they look at the risk.
So could we get information on what we're paying right now?
What do you want to know about what we're paying?
well,
now? I can give it
rates.
all of you. Yeah,
So,
I think I presented that at budget committee last year when we were doing that budget. I want to say I sent a spreadsheet. I know, go figure.
I will look for that.
It's basically whatever that budget line is. Plus, I think I put in like an extra family plan in case somebody decides to family up this year. Well, we also hired 3 full-time people last week, so one of them might want insurance.
Just doesn't, I guess the biggest thing that is confusing to me is that we are required to offer 3 different plans. And
We're not, I mean, that's what the employee handbook says. I don't know that we're necessarily required. I think
So
if
I
we
guess can we
don't do
check?
it, we would maybe just not have employees.
well, yes and no. I mean, it depends, right? Like, can we at least check what that, is that a requirement just by a handbook? Or is that a requirement because not many places have 3 different plans, you know? Like, I don't know.
Well, we only have 2 right now anyway, so.
Okay. No, it just,
Yeah.
even what to ask in terms of like, you know, talking to Anthem or a, you know, Harvard Pilgrim or anybody, right? And saying, hey, guys, would you
So I
insure,
think-
right?
So and this is where I am not a benefits administrator, really. I moonlighted as one for a hot minute in the fall. But my understanding of the way it works is Health Trust kind of bundles all of us smaller towns to be seen as a larger pool by Blue Cross Blue Shield or Harvard Pilgrim. And so those are already the plans that we're getting. I don't know if it still works if we're not pooled with other similar sized municipalities to be a bigger entity.
Right. I guess understanding if if there are any other specific rules to municipalities where we should start, because if not, then there are companies that work with small companies, and you know, I think that the last time that I checked, the requirement was 20, and anything below was a problem. But if you had, as a company, and I'm talking business, I'm not talking municipality,
I
but if
don't-
you had 20 employees as a
hold on.
small business,
I don't know that we have 20. Let me check.
then on the payroll, then you could participate in some of the plans
On the payroll.
as a business,
On the payroll eligible for benefits?
right?
I'm not sure that we do. I think there's only like 12 or 15 maybe.
okay, then there's a problem.
Right, I think we're gonna need obviously more time to
Yeah.
review.
But I don't know who reviews or finds out the answers to these things.
Jim and I were speaking about, when we were chatting about coming up budget committee stuff, health was on a big, one of the heavy hitters since our costs increased so much year over year. And so I think in general, whether it's a cross committee, subcommittee, it would be, seems very much a priority to create some sort of group to head this investigation.
I don't disagree that somebody should
Did
investigate.
I missed it? Did we say when the next vote on this is?
Hold on.
Do you know, Dan?
It is due out of committee at the end of May,
Okay.
and depending on what happens
Right, on the
there,
floor.
the House committee, sorry. And then depending on what that committee recommends, will determine if it's ought to pass, et cetera, et cetera. So we won't know probably more until the beginning of summer.
Okay.
And when we talked, I had no knowledge of this thing going on at the state level. I mean, this was clearly just a matter of, we're going to have to strategically look at and prioritize and plan. And it seems like healthcare costs is one of those things that the tail will wag the dog if you don't kind of understand it and kind of control it. And we talked about saying, I asked, has there ever been did you ever set up subcommittees on the budget committee where you just 2 members and something like this? I would think there'd be 2 members from budget, 2 members from select board, members from school board who look at healthcare and say, okay, where's this going? How much are we spending, right? And how do we control? Now this sounds like more than just, okay, looking at our plans and our future. It's the plan that we have may not even exist. So
Reading some of the packet, it looks like it's the state fighting with health trusts, like
The legislature.
legislature. That's what
I mean, I
mean.
guess we could talk to our various, or maybe we could invite our elected officials to
Yeah,
come
yeah,
talk
yeah.
to us about if
Right.
we know more.
Yeah, it's like one of the lines says, Health Trust ignored the study and did not adjust rates, causing financial losses for the pool as an increasing number of members migrating to the underpriced higher deductible plans. Yeah, it's interesting. Michelle, I texted you the link to the packet, and maybe we can include that in the minutes so everybody can see.
yeah, I think
packet.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we, were you talking about inviting them to select board or budget committee? Maybe we could put that on the list. Jim, Michelle, to invite.
I mean, it's not,
Eric
it's not that it's not a
and-
select board issue, because it is, but it's a budgetary issue. so-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Melissa?
Yeah, Rep. Truer and Litchfield, right?
Yeah.
To our next meeting
Mm-hmm. Which will be.
to address SB 297.
Yes.
The time
I don't know.
date?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks. Yeah, I'll do that.
What is the? Okay.
And the number of affected people, when you consider all of SAU 16, is obviously massive. And so I know the district is all over this as well, so I'll continue to float updates as I have it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm also gonna reshare with Michelle the benefits worksheet and budget that I had sent out last year for anyone that wants to know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like we maybe briefly discussed this last year. For some reason, it wasn't a thing. But trying to have the municipal employees join in as a group
We
with
cannot.
that.
We cannot do
Okay.
that. I was on the school, put my school board hat back on. Because it's done throughout the whole SAU, every single town would have to agree to let Brentwood's municipal employees do things. to join, and that would be incredibly complicated because there's no board that runs that entity. As opposed to like the joint school board is an entity that exists. And makes
Well, if health trust falls apart, then maybe we have an opportunity.
listen, if health trust falls
Well,
apart,
that's what I meant.
a lot of
is
things that
if it falls apart for us, it falls apart for other towns
Right. It
does,
too.
yeah.
Right.
And I mean, maybe not like a bigger town. This might not be as much of an issue, but there's other small towns in our SAU who might be having a similar
that
conversation.
sounds like something that somebody with a lot more understanding of how health
Yeah,
insurance
benefits
works
and
at the
insurance.
municipal level would.
Yeah.
Right.
I would.
I
personally
was just throwing it out there as a thought
Yeah.
for if we're going to explore what are we going to do if health trust falls apart.
But then there's falls apart as well, so I guess we all gonna be
Exactly.
in one big pool, so.
Yeah, would it make sense to just have the SAU plus the
Right.
municipal
Each town.
employees from SAU towns become the big pool to try to get competitive pricing?
But the point is
something
through
that
who?
I don't have to.
Through who?
Yeah.
Yes.
And who's gonna, how it's gonna be decided upon, right? Because each town's gonna be like, well,
That's
right,
good.
like something that other towns may select,
yeah,
Brentwood might not be happy with,
true.
or vice versa.
Okay.
Okay.
So is that,
Oh, that's it for me.
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for the headache at the end. Wow, I didn't know, I actually didn't know that.
saw
But I do think that's a good idea to have the state reps come and address that.
Yeah.
Get their perspective on, right? Like, I think that's a really good idea.
I mean, when you read the packet, it seems like the legislature is like, hey, health trust is ignoring all these things. They're not getting actuarial, experts in, and the legislature is like, we got all these things, but it doesn't state, it isn't very clear on like what happens if health trust
Yeah, like, it
ceases
just
to
seems like they
exist.
would be like setting a lot of municipalities and
Right.
school districts up for like a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one question? When you were talking about the solar panel project, I know there was a whole process that we were getting some sort of refund, rebate, whatever. Do you know where in the process we are with that?
Yeah, it is progressing. So we get updates at every one of our school board meeting from our finance director with the SAU, who's spearheading it all. And to give you specifics on the spot, I'll be sure to. I know that's an important one, so I'll be sure to come to each one of these meetings with specific notes on that, ready to share. But it's moving along. It's a little arduous, just getting updates and like figuring out where you stand, but it's progressing along, I can tell you. Yep.
I think, Michelle, with everything that's happening right now, the individual returns get delayed by at least 18 to 24 months.
Oh.
So I would expect that that's gonna also be delayed.
Okay.
That's at least what I've heard the last, since tax season just kind of ended.
And I haven't heard
Shortage of
that
employees,
affecting our
shortage of
specific case yet,
resources.
but
And hopefully, like if municipalities and schools go through different, flow, right, then maybe that's gonna be better. But there's a definite backlog on many of the things. They're quick to, if you owe, there's a quick way to pay. There's not a quick way to get it back.
Any other questions for school? Next item on the agenda says budgets to review.
None.
Didn't think so. Old business? Anything that I wouldn't know?
Yeah, not that we haven't discussed that I know of.
Talked about all the things there.
Nothing that comes to mind.
Next is new business and correspondence. I guess correspondence first. Anything came in? No? Okay, I'd open it up then to any member for new business or want to bring before the board. You can pass the brownies this way too.
oh,
Actually, if no one else wants to say so, I was going to bring up on new business that at the public budget hearing, there was a presentation given on the tax impact. I believe the number was 7.1%. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, I know at town meeting, obviously, there was a slight reduction in the budget, the appropriation line. There were also votes taken, and the warrants, there were changes to the warrants. So obviously, that the tax impact slightly changes. I was wondering if it makes sense that this board goes back through to relook at, based on the changes at town meeting, maybe on some of the assumptions that were made, coming up with an updated estimate of the tax impact for the 2025 budget. Maybe something that in time for the tax bills that get sent out in July, that maybe we would at that point be able to tell people better, like, okay, this is your first half payment, prepayment on this year's tax bill, but based on our latest view, the tax impact is probably going to be, fill in some number.
Will we have all there were a lot of assumptions made at that time. Will we have all the actual numbers? Because Letty is shaking her head. For that, we would need those numbers, right? The revenues and everything else?
My main concern is that it's a reval year, so we really have no idea what that's gonna look like. We don't know how much home values are gonna.
Well, I think for sure, but the reevaluation itself just lowers the tax rate, right? Like, so if the total property values go
Not
up.
necessarily.
Okay, maybe I should finish. I agree that in a reevaluation year, we're not going to be able to tell. Last year, we were able to tell people, we expect your taxes are going to go up 3%. So Jim's taxes, yours is going to go up 3%. Letty's 3%, Michelle's 3%, unless you've done work on your property. And I agree that in a reevaluation year, we can't do that. Unfortunately, we cannot tell Jim, Letty, Michelle, anyone, their specific tax increase, because we can only say the average increase will be X percent. If your property goes up the exact same amount as the average property in Brentwood, so if we do a reevaluation and all the properties go up 30%, if your home goes up 30%, then we can tell you exactly what your tax increase is going to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that's where the confusion comes in, is that
Well, but what number do we use for that? Like, I don't know, our house price is gonna double or just by 50%?
but what I'm saying is that on an average 400,000, if we said the average house was $400,000,
Before revaluation.
correct, before. And if everybody, I'm just saying that I think we can tell people what the tax impact of the budget is, and we can tell them what the dollar value is on a $400,000 house and a $600,000 house. We can do that.
Okay.
And the reevaluation year, really, I totally agree. And I think some of us may have talked about this beforehand when I was talking to some people just on how this committee functions and works. But I think maybe it's something in Methuen. We used to send, when you're sending tax bills to people's homes, if there was something important to share, that's where we put it in that envelope. So I don't know if this is the year that we do it, where maybe because it's a tax cap, maybe because it's a reevaluation, we do a better job of explaining to people what they can expect on that second tax bill. That's why I think it would be a good thing to do to have this tax impact re-looked at, because I did, and it's in the minutes, I spoke at the budget hearing. I didn't agree with the 10%, and I don't even think we're going to have $1.35 million of fund balance to use, or if we do, we're going to drain it down to 1%. So, and it makes a big difference in the tax impact. So I'm just saying, now that we should look at it again, and if it makes sense to have.
What numbers you wanna use, you can plug them in right in.
I don't think we have to decide that tonight. I'm just saying that as a group, if it's something that we'd like to do, I think it'd be a good agenda item for a future meeting to look at that. And you and I could probably give a presentation, or I'll do it, and you and I can meet ahead of time and kind of, and share with this group. And I think we as a group, I don't think it's very hard. I think it's done, just because you don't know the exact number, if you knew the exact number, sure, we calculate it. But in our lives and in our businesses, we do this all the time. We estimate, and you do, obviously, if we're already a quarter of the year through, right, the year, so some of the numbers have come in. and this no-
I think it's going to be confusing. I think if you use an example and just arbitrary, like you pick numbers, then it's confusing. And that's what the select board does in October, right? When they look at and they figure out there's a calculation to that. So essentially, you're proposing to do that before the select board does it, and that's where I'm confused.
No, I think this committee did it at the budget hearing.
That wasn't that though. That was Jack's way of trying to show how the formula works. So if that's what you want to do, that's great. We can definitely go through how the formula works, and you can make an example. But I think to calculate and predict what that's going to look like for an average house in December, it's not and then when it's going to differ from what the select board going to do in October, then how?
I mean, I guess if it's a very conservative estimate,
It would have
like,
Like we could say what impact of budget, now that we have the final budget, we could say that, but I don't see how we can do select board's job and guessing on what it's gonna be and average value of the house and everything else.
No, but the budget committee presented that it would be 7.1%.
Again, that was different. That was an example of
No, it wasn't.
budget chair, the chair of the budget committee presented an example that was not based on, it was his way of, okay, let's imagine that these numbers were correct. That was an example. It was not a calculation of an actual rate. And that was explained
So,
back then as well.
for example, I could say that, because we know what the appropriation is, I could say that revenues are 2.2 million. I think that was the number used earlier. That's $100,000 higher than last year. That feels like a pretty safe. I think Daphne said lots of people are buying cars. So, the other two things that go into that, which is the war service credit and the overlay, let's leave those the same. That would give us a total town tax effort of 4.9 million. Dividing that by, I'm going to pretend that we're not having a reevaluation this year, and we're just going to increase evaluation by 2%, which feels pretty conservative. That would mean that the municipal tax rate is going up by. Are you looking at municipal or total?
Total.
The total tax rate is going up by 3.18%.
And the reason why I said total is because, again, I would think that the person who's going to be receiving the bill, I understand we list the pieces on there, but they're concerned with the total bill, not just one little piece. So that's why I said total.
Yeah, 3.18%.
And I noticed that when you were saying the important numbers, you didn't mention fund balance offset.
I looked at how much fund balance we had last year, which was 1.8 million. And then I know that we spent 300 and some change. 350. Yes, 350 something. So I have it at 1.3 million because I also don't know if there's any other revenues that would fall into that. That is just barely within the 5% suggested. So we wouldn't use any.
And if we don't use any fund balance to offset taxes, what did you say that the tax increase would be?
The total tax increase or the one for the
Total.
3.18%. But of that, the town is a 22% increase.
Okay.
So that's why I was asking where you wanted to.
No, I just was wondering because I know that the presentation given said 7.1, and that's using 1.35 million, and you just said if you take it and you use none, it can't possibly be lower. It would have to be a lot higher than 7%.
I don't know what his presentation was about.
Again, we didn't, I think you're assuming that we reviewed something and collaborated on you know, we didn't.
Which we can do.
So
It
we
sounds
we
like
could
that's what you're
totally do
asking.
that.
I guess that's what I'm asking. I mean,
Right.
and I apologize, but like every year I've been here, I thought there was a projected tax impact given by the budget committee at the budget hearing. They told us what we vote at town meeting, how much you think that your
Yes,
taxes are
so
gonna go
there's
up, and it
always-
was
there's-
always been a number.
So then the standard way we do it is we take the increase and we divide it by the total valuation, and that gives you a
Yes.
number. However, that number didn't work.
What do you
2
mean
years
it didn't
ago,
work?
And some people got really mad that it didn't work. So Jack, I think, tried to do something.
An example, right,
to-
he did an
to
amazing
better
job at it too, but what
try
he
to
was trying to
explain
do
it.
is to explain questions that came up as a result of something that was a fluke, for better word, because it was one-time situation and people had so many, which I understand, but it was just an example. It was his attempt to answer questions that came that has nothing to, like, it's not something that particular calculation is not something that we've done as a board for years. And what we've done as a board, as Letty's saying, is that, you know, is to take that budget, the total budget that we approved,
Yep.
and divide that by the total valuation, of, you know, and that was it. And that we can do. That we can totally do. But I would caution, I guess, getting into other, because that's not really our role. And that's what the select board does in October. So if you want to do another example, I'm all for it. If you would like to understand the calculation, I'm all for it. I would caution against presenting it as this is what you're going to be looking for in December, because that may not be true.
Well, I think there is no way to give an estimate. I mean, we beat that horse pretty much dead. But I think maybe what Jim is trying to get at is there was sort of an expectation that was presented at the hearing that is probably going to be very low compared to what we may actually face. And it may be wise to give that heads up so people can at least be aware of that. Now, I don't know if the best way to do it is the way we've always done it.
Well, then there's a question of, do we separate out the different parts of the tax bill versus? Then there's a question of whether or not it's good to discuss the total tax rate or separate out the different pieces, because as has been brought up many, many times, 80% of your tax bill is the schools. So those shifts are gonna obviously have a lot more impact.
But I think the other pieces, the county, the co-op school, and the Swayze school, we know perfectly, right, accurately. I'm not, I don't think what
We
was
don't know what
presented at budget hearing,
We don't know what the county's gonna be, we don't know that.
the county is gonna be pretty close, and it's so small, it's not gonna make a difference to the overall tax rate. I think the only variable is the municipal piece. This is I believe if you look at the numbers on the total tax impact, the only piece that I believe needs to be looked at is the municipal piece, because I believe that there were some assumptions made that were really incorrect. And my fear is that what got me here in sitting here is that when I opened a tax bill, I was told it was supposed to be a 3% increase, and I got a 7% increase, and I wasn't happy, and I wasn't alone. There were a lot of people, because you don't want to surprise people that way. And what I'm trying to prevent is the same thing happening this year that happened last year.
Okay, so what do you suggest we do?
I think we as a board look at how the municipal side, there's only a couple of variables that need to be looked at. And I think I can address that with this board at the next, if we want to do this. I can present this next time, and I'll review it with you first. There's only a couple of variables that really need to be looked at that I think were incorrect, and I think it was revenue projection. I think 10% is too high, and I do not believe that we're not gonna be able to use $1.35 million, because I believe right now we only have 1.6
Nope,
roughly.
and that's why I said I guess here's my question, and maybe using historical information will help frame it better. If you're asking us just to break down the town portion, cool. Last year's increase for just the town portion was 35%, which was also not the number that you were talking about. So like, that's also like, if we're talking about, because you're talking about 7% that was your whole tax bill.
Correct.
Right. But the,
And I don't think it's going to be 7. I think it's going to be a lot more.
But is it,
that's what I'm
is it our
saying.
job, like, are we gonna get into business? Because I'd rather step away from that, to be honest. I know it was an honorable idea, an attempt, but it's not our job, and we don't hold those, we only have, our decision-making is on portion of appropriations, right, for the town.
No,
So to
that's,
bring-
well, that, I don't think that's true. I think as budget committee, we are responsible for also looking at revenues that come into the different departments and the municipality. If you look at the
That's-
RSA, it says that.
And that's great if that's true. I'm not sure if it is because we've been kind of told otherwise. So we can look into,
you,
Well-
that's not, I gave it to you last year.
no,
year
no, no,
before.
give it,
But
like,
the
meaning
point
that we
is
don't have any.
Nobody's
um,
keeping track of that right now,
power
because that's
over it.
accounting.
Okay.
And that's another.
How about, how about if I present something next time that, and then we can do with it what we want to do with it? Just to show you what I'm talking about in terms of how some of these slight changes can really affect the overall tax impact. And I'm talking about the variables are only municipal revenue for the town of Brentwood,
Mhm.
and then fund balance used to offset taxes.
Mhm.
That's it. There's just
I
those
would
two.
love to do that, but as long as we do it as a committee and keep it kind of just as our examples, our work in terms of like
Totally.
figuring it out, but communicating it with the July bill, that's where I guess maybe I misunderstood your intention, but that's the only thing that I was questioning.
Cool.
Because if we communicate that, that might actually, if it's not true and we don't have a lot of information, we don't have power over that, then we are
Cool.
going to be at
My-
fault for presenting.
Absolutely.
you know,
And I
right
would
information.
never want to make any sort of misrepresentations ever. I just think that, and I bring up the July bill because it's a good time that if it gives us time as a group, because I think this should also be discussed with the budget committee as well, because I think the view should, the select board. I think this view that we are giving to the community, the taxpayers, should be something that we both stand up and say, yeah, this is our best view of what we think is coming. And again, at this point, we're only talking revenue. That's the only real variable. The offset to taxes is something that the select board decides on. And truly, we know what the fund balance is. We know it was $977,000 at the end of last year. There's only a couple of ways that it grows. One is additional balance based on expenditures that were not spent. So you had appropriations that weren't expended, and I believe that was about 600 grand, but we'd get the exact numbers from Andrea. And then there's a revenue surplus. So if we had forecasted in October $2,100,646, and when between November, December, the revenues came in a little bit higher, you might have a revenue surplus that could add to it. But again, it would probably be pretty small. So I'm looking at a number of $1.6 million of fund balance total. And if we use 335,000 per what they told, per what the voters voted at town meeting for those warrants, that would leave us $1.2 million in fund balance, which is 5.1%, right?
Really,
And which is back to your point. If you use no other fund balance offset other than that.
because best practice is to have between 5 and 17%.
Correct. It's the 7% becomes something much bigger, right? Like,
Again, if you're only going to look at the town portion, yes.
okay, that's it. Yeah, there's nothing else to look at.
Well, sure, but if we're gonna do that, I think we should.
What I'm saying
do
is,
it the last 5 years or something, just for reference points, because in a vacuum.
no, and my point, I'm strictly my concern is as a body, this body told the community, the taxpayer at budget hearing, 7.1%, whatever it comes out to be on a $400,000 house. That was put in writing and shared with the community.
Mhm.
And if we think that it's not going to be that, it's going to be something higher, I think we should let them know before the November bills come out. That's all I'm saying.
But-
And I think we can do that.
Well, but we don't know, because we don't know what the select board is gonna do to buy down the tax rate. I guess that's what I'm saying.
They're not, I don't, yeah, well, but they're going to be very limited on buying down the tax rate.
No, they're not. They can do whatever they want. honestly,
Where would they find the money from, Letty? I
from
mean,
the unreserved fund balance.
but there's, I just said, there's one, I think there's only $1.6 million in that account,
Yeah.
okay?
But just because it's best practices doesn't mean that the select board
We have-
actually has to.
We have
do
been
the
not doing
best.
best practices for quite some time.
So you'd say you'd use all of it, and bring us down to
Oh,
0%?
I
Is that what
didn't
you're
say
saying?
use all of it either,
But I-
but there is something in between all of it, none of it. And it's possible that the board might feel
Sure.
that building up this fund balance is a.
I don't think the
multi-year
board,
process.
I don't think the board's gonna use 1.35 million and bring it down to 0.9% is what I'm saying. I really doubt that, but I'd be more than happy to discuss it with this group and the select board.
I guess I think the thing that I'm struggling with is you're talking about two different numbers because you keep mentioning this 7% that you saw when you opened your tax bill and you expected a different
No.
number, but that's not the town number. And so I'm trying to figure out what number we're gonna use and why and what we're trying to achieve.
I've been only speaking about the total tax impact of the 2025 budget.
And that includes areas that are not part of our, like, we are not a board.
But what I'm saying is that the other pieces are pretty much are cast in stone. The co-op school, the Swayze school,
The appropriations, yes, but the revenue, no.
there's,
We don't have that. I mean, you can invite Molly and figure that
Right,
out,
but
but
you
we
were
only
just
have the
saying that it's
cost
possible
side
that
of
the
it.
state is going to give us less money than we usually get this year. So that would,
Which would make it even worse.
yes.
So I think what Jim's trying to say is we need to throw out a warning here.
I
And
just
I
don't know.
don't
It's
disagree.
But is it that's the thing, we would be guessing. How do we communicate? Hey, guys, we're guessing it might be this. That's like, if we don't have,
because if we get the guess wrong, people get upset. Unless we guess really
Okay.
high. And they'll be thrilled when it comes in lower.
yeah,
Or
and
they'll
I,
just
and
say,
I
"Oh,
think
we're
that's what,
gonna
I
roll
think
thing
his,
Because we've guessed that it's gonna be so high.
and is
then
it our
people- and
place to
then
guess?
I'm
it
not,
isn't actually that
I
high.
wouldn't want to guess anything. I don't want to guess. Why don't we
Well,
just,
We are guessing.
I mean, they're gonna be educated guesses, but they will still be
when
at
the,
best guesstimates.
when the number was presented at the budget hearing, the
That was a
7.1%,
guess.
Are you talking
was a
about for
guess. It was an
25 or
example.
for 25, it was presented that the 2025 budget, the tax impact was 7.1%.
Okay.
And the two assumptions that were in there that I felt were not,
8 o'clock, everybody, take your meds.
were not correct, were not that accurate, was saying that there'd be a 10% revenue increase
So here,
and
so
1.35 million of tax. That's all I'm
Jim,
saying. Is
you and
that
I have talked about this in many public meetings, and I guess what I still don't understand is something happened at the public hearing. It is done. We can't do anything about going backwards. Can we try to figure out what we're gonna do moving forward and stop saying what went wrong before?
the whole point that I brought this up is because if the number is going to be higher than was presented, if we feel that there's going to be much higher, we should let the taxpayers know sooner than when they open their tax bill and find it out.
So what we could do is if that feels important to you, we could go back to the same way that we've always done the estimation, which is the change in the budget divided by the total valuation, and send that out. But that might also still be wrong because it's a revaluation.
But
How
that
about
would be
this?
something that we used to do, and that's actually just costs over valuation, and that I would be comfortable with. But guessing on
think-
where revenues are gonna be and funding's gonna come in, I don't think I'm comfortable with, because it's nothing that we have power over.
I think Jim offered to do the calculation, and I think it would be a good exercise to see what he puts in there, because I think we've been going around in circles for a few minutes, and it might be
Like it's done.
more helpful. I know, but he seems to disagree. And so I think potentially we could come together as a committee to be open to a new perspective on how we could do things. And instead of going around in circles tonight, we might have more, I can't think right now. We might get somewhere if we have something to look at. So I'd love to table this conversation and allow Jim to do his exercise and then review it at a next meeting.
Should I say?
Yes,
Yes,
that
please.
sounds good. I just got confused with including these kind of
And then we can decide
speculations.
what to
in,
do with it.
You know, in-
Yeah.
with the bill or things like that. Just because if we say it here, we say we're gonna do it, we're gonna include it, then it's an expectation, and we may not have the proper information to do
Right.
that.
So I think the comment is do the exercise and let's figure out what to do with it. And if we agree to do something with it, that
Okay.
Jim.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
great. And I apologize if I'm not clearly articulating it. It's not as complicated as it sounds, really.
We're just gonna have a little bit of bumbles while we learn how to communicate to each other, you know?
I would agree with Alina that if we presented it the way we've done it for the past at least 9 years that I've been on the board, that might be a simpler, cleaner,
Because at
not
least then
going to
we
be
stand by those
accurate,
numbers.
not going to be accurate, but it's at least what we're all used to, and I feel like that's a safe way to do it.
But
I
we can
will
definitely look at
absolutely
whatever-
show the number, how it was done for the last 9 years that you've done it. I already have that, and I can,
I'm gonna send this to you because
Hmm.
you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel.
it's not reinventing anything. It's actually 2 clicks in the spreadsheet that you gave me anyway, so, and it just calculates the number. And I could show this board, I'll do it next time. Why don't I just do that? I'll say, here's if we did it the old way, what it comes out to be. By the way, if you take the scenario of this type of revenue, a growth assumption, and if our select board uses this amount of the remaining fund balance.
I think a lot of that's going to go over people's heads.
I was just gonna
Keep it
say, I
simple.
think it's one thing for us to
Okay.
explain in a meeting setting where you're presenting, you
Sure.
have the information, somebody has a question, they can stand up, they can ask their question, get
Sure.
clarifying information. If we're mailing this out with people's tax bills,
Oh,
they're mainly
yes, please.
looking at their
No,
bill.
I totally agree.
Well, that's
I'm
right.
talking about discussing at this meeting.
No,
The only
that-
way I would send something to
that
people's
would be
homes if it
great.
was clear enough, if it was crystal clear that we all agreed, that we
say, the
knew. No.
ability
I
to-
totally agree.
I think that's where misunderstanding.
Oh,
was,
no.
because it
Yes,
came
we're
out
all
as if we're
thinking
gonna
about
send
what you're
something
sending out.
No, I totally
and
agree.
that, I think, needs
And
to be.
our ad hoc committee talked a lot about that. Like, when we're putting something in writing that we're gonna send to people, it needs to be crystal clear and.
Yes, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I
as long
think
as we're
what the,
not
I
sending
think what the
anything out
clerk
yet,
had told me.
Let's do the exercise and
Yes.
revisit.
Definitely, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, we need few, right?
I
Because
was gonna say, it seems like
at
we
this
have
point,
lot
there's a lot of,
things.
like,
to
we
discuss.
might have made some, we might have created some confusion too, so,
Not more than normal.
I know. There's a lot of information today, like I did not expect this much
You
information
didn't expect me
today.
to ask a million questions? Come on.
No,
know that by
that's different, I guess I've been living under a rock. That should be fine.
Do you think we should meet before?
I wouldn't be heartbroken if we could find out what's going on with bond payments and tax cap and whatnot before the next building committee meeting.
So can
I know
we,
that's
can we meet
optimistic.
May 5th? When's the building committee meeting? Yeah, can we meet May 5th?
I can do the 5th.
He's not gonna be here.
Yeah, we have a school board meeting that night,
First Friday, the first Monday.
first Monday of every
Is there a
month.
school board meeting tonight?
There's a joint board meeting, but I talked to Brian and agreed that
Okay.
I should come here since this is the first one.
Yeah, you don't
Come
miss out on this.
on.
Well, I'm learning. I would love to see the presentations that we're talking about, both how it's been done in the past and Jim's ideas, because I'm learning, but it's also
like
still a little
spreadsheets?
choppy for me right now. So.
How do you feel about a spreadsheet?
I like a spreadsheet, but I also like a crisp presentation
Okay.
of the spreadsheet.
All right.
Like, can you make it here before 6?
But yeah,
Yeah.
first Monday of every month.
Yeah, I could
so
do
I'm
that.
out for the 5th.
It might be a good time to discuss the times that we meet. And I'm not
Days?
sure, yeah, days and or times. If some of us have a more flexible schedule, not that I'd love for you to have a double header with budget committee and school board, but it might open up more possibilities for us to meet if we,
If they're not always overlapping with.
yeah, if we chose a different time, or, I know the days are kind of, it'd be nice to have the same day of the week that we always have, but it might be a good time to open that discussion.
I think the complication comes with Tuesdays are select board meetings and Wednesdays
We're in
are-
every other week now, though.
Yes, but if,
For now.
okay.
It sounded like you were asking, can budget committee meet earlier on, like stay on Mondays and meet earlier?
Potentially.
I can.
I'm gonna send this to you two again.
I could meet at 5 on Mondays.
Yeah.
I don't know, what's your schedule like?
If it were Mondays, I could be here from 5 to 6.
Right,
If this is the first Monday of every month,
right,
because then I would drive over to Swayze School for a 6 o'clock meeting.
right.
But really, that's like, I'm here from 5 to 5:50, so.
Is that once a month?
That's, yeah.
And
First
there's a
Monday of
joint
every
school board
month.
meeting, and then it's
But the joint
wild card.
board meetings are like few and far between. They're sort of like
Okay.
quarterly, so.
We could potentially do 5 o'clock on school board nights and then resume our 6 o'clocks if needed.
I mean, I'm fine with doing 5 whenever.
Same.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah.
So if it's the first Monday of every month, we'll start at 5, otherwise start at 6, is that what you're saying? Or
I'm opening it up to discussion if anybody else has a strong preference, because I'm not sure I have a strong preference.
The only thing that I will say is around 8:30 or 9 o'clock, I become useless either way, and that will
Right.
change. But even if we start earlier, it's really just after this meeting goes for about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Yeah,
Your
2
brain
hours is
starts to
kind of my
melt.
wall.
Yeah.
with this?
That's
Yeah.
most of us, right?
Although I feel like during budget season, it could be nice for us to have our meeting on a day after select board, because I feel like, you know, select, no?
I mean, that wouldn't be until maybe 8 o'clock.
No, not on
Oh.
the same day. Like, you
was
guys
like,
meet on
no.
Tuesdays, and then it's almost a full week, and then we're rediscussing the thing you discussed a full week ago.
Yeah.
So rather than it being like Tuesdays all the way until next Monday, maybe do like
Right.
Tuesday and then on Thursday. No, not on the same day. Oh
Is
my
there a
gosh.
Thursday?
No, so planning
Planning
board
board.
meets first and so we have a.
I was just
we
throwing
have
a
meeting room issue
Thursday,
where
but-
there's
Right,
only
right, right,
one.
right. No, totally get that. I don't know all of the
But
meetings.
Planning board
What time do they
starts
meet?
at 7. So if we're gonna
Oh.
start meeting earlier
5?
and
I don't know if I could do 5 on
gives
Thursday.
our
Oh, on
Okay.
Thursday.
I can do 5 on Mondays for sure,
I mean, or when,
but
Right, right, right.
well, maybe not Wednesdays, because then it's only if there's questions on things at select board that you would only have.
What's on Wednesday nights?
conservation sometimes and library sometimes, but library doesn't meet here.
The library doesn't meet here.
Conservation
second-
does.
Second Wednesday of the month for conservation.
But, so that's once a month that we would have to, what time is that usually?
6:30, I believe.
I mean, in theory, if we're meeting right after the meeting where we've discussed it at the select board, we maybe won't need
Right, right, right.
a lot of time.
Depends on the, depends on the budget.
Well, we should just maybe split the budgets out so that we're not.
Just a thought that I had, because I feel like that came up a few
Right.
times last year too, where it's like, oh, we got ahead of like, okay, we could totally look at this budget, but like,
We had
select
to-
board
yeah,
hadn't
yeah.
gotten there yet. So it might just make more sense
The
that,
schedule was
budget committee came
also
after.
a little more free and wild last year.
Yeah.
I assume there's.
I wonder if there's flexibility if we met at 5. What about 5 on Wednesdays?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know.
I work an hour away on Wednesday, so it depends
Oh.
how early I can get out, and I
Right, right,
don't
right.
know until that day.
That seems
Okay.
very inconvenient to plan for.
Mondays I work from home.
Okay.
So
okay.
So let's just.
5
put
o'clock is
Monday.
fine.
do Mondays at
I don't care what
5.
time, it's just let's
School board
not end at 10.
towards the top of the agenda.
Right. We
Yeah.
could put school board first. Right, and just
Anything like
that one,
Or we just have to end.
Also that.
Yeah, on that week, we're
And
done
that's it.
by then.
Yeah.
Actually, because,
then we
because
can
once
meet
a month.
again.
So in
Yeah.
Only
theory,
once
like,
a
we
month.
could just,
If it happens to be that
we could try to
night.
schedule budget, so it's like the easier ones on those.
Right.
Okay.
What,
I don't hate that.
like, we could, if it's a school,
Yeah, perfect.
I don't know how flexible people's schedules are, but if it is a time where we need to get stuff done, you know, maybe we could see if the availability is to meet at 4:30. I don't know how
I
early.
mean, we could
people
also
can
have a
go,
working
but-
session. That is a thing that some other boards have, where it's not really a meeting, but it's also not a meeting, because if there's more than a quorum of us here, but like, in terms of working through that predictor kind of thing that you were talking about, like, we could have a whole session where we just talk about that, and it's not really, it's a work session.
Right,
So
not
if
like
you
a
have to
voting
dip out-
meeting.
If you have to
Right.
dip out, that's okay.
Right, right. Okay. Well,
Turning into pumpkin.
okay, why don't we,
So do we wanna
try
do the
Mondays
5th?
at 5?
Do we want to do the 5th
Uh,
ahead of budget,
yeah.
municipal?
Let's do that.
All right.
What's the cadence? Like, how frequently?
We're gonna figure that out
Wait,
later.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
During-
feel like they
during
get
the
scheduled
summer-
as they go.
During the summer, we kind of do once a month-ish.
Unless there's something that,
Yeah, typically, unless
And then once we get into budget season, it's like every week
it might be every week
Yeah.
or every other week.
or every other week.
depends.
And during the summer school board, like, we don't meet for a couple months, so if
Right.
you want to
Okay.
push it back to 6 during the summertime,
Right,
we
okay.
can.
Or are we doing like the walkthroughs?
Yeah, it's mostly
again?
walk. Yeah, I think it would be
think
helpful.
earlier is better.
Yeah.
Like, just because sometimes it goes later and
Right.
like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, today's just after Easter, it's hard.
Yeah.
But generally, like, after, like, normally at 8 o'clock, I'm still okay, after 9, and when we push that,
I don't know, 8
that
o'clock,
might be
I'm starting.
difficult.
I'm
I don't know,
starting to
maybe
get a
it's
little
just
squishy.
age and my shields, I don't know.
Yeah, so why don't we choose Mondays at 5? And, you know, there's nothing that says that we can't test, tweak, and try again, you know?
Well, and
Yeah.
typically in your minutes, you'll have at the bottom the next
Right,
meeting or the next
right.
couple of
I-
meetings.
Yeah.
so-
If we want to schedule them out, we can do that, but
Well, I think because it's summer, only having one, because there's some
What
specific.
one a month unless we do site
Sure.
visits.
Sure.
In the
Sounds good.
summer, Yeah.
Yeah.
But it seems like we might need 2 in May 5th and May
Yeah.
something.
Which,
After.
do we want to just put the 19th on the schedule
don't
to
think-
have it?
I just will not be able to be here on the 19th.
Oh, never mind.
I have a birthday to attend.
Uh,
My own child. so I can't
Happy
say-
Is
birthday.
it yours?
It's one of mine. It's my big one.
Okay, well, let's do the 5th, and
Let's
then
just
we
do
can
the
always
5th, see what
meet
happens.
early June if needed.
Do you want to let's put in the June date, just so we have it, and if. Well, it doesn't have to be the 2nd, it could be.
I was going to say the 2nd is
Could
going to
be
be
the 9th.
hard for me.
Yeah, we can do the 9th. Let's shoot for that.
So we have May 5th and June 9th
Yeah.
at 5 o'clock both times.
Correct.
Yeah.
Budget committee?
And in May, we can discuss whether we'll do the site visits and who we want to do,
Yeah.
because I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
June 9th.
All in favor?
Do we need to vote those two? Or you got it in there?
Oh.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, no.
We-
did
we
not
haven't
do
gotten
that
there
with
yet.
comment.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. We
I'm
haven't
going to
got-
vote against adjournment then.
I withdraw my motion.
We didn't forget about you.
We did not.
You're just starting.
Just
Yeah.
so I don't forget. So there's no, I guess I took up all the time on new business, sorry about that. I guess I would open it up at this time to public comments from anybody.
You deserve it.
Yeah.
I know.
Just hit the button on the microphone.
Yeah.
so it turns red,
And-
please. Thank you.
And you know the rules and name, address. and-
Sure. David Massey, Fellows Road.
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
Massey, M-A-S-S-E. I will try and make this brief. I don't want to keep you here any longer, but I did want to touch on a couple things related to school board. I have one kid in Swayze and one coming in next year. And I took the opportunity finally to attend a school board meeting, other than the budget meetings that happen every year. You know, I've regretfully, this was my first, but understanding the importance of really what's coming down from the state. I think it's really important. These are not decisions that will be made by this board, but I think there are implications locally that are being made for us at the state level. It was mentioned to HB 741 related to open enrollment, and I just wanted to read a couple passages just to give the hundreds of people in attendance here that they can understand the implications of this. So just a couple brief passages. There shall be no tuition charge for any pupil attending a public school. For transferring students, the pupil's resident district shall pay the receiving district an amount equal to not less than 80% of that district's average cost per pupil as determined by the Department of Education, blah, blah, blah. The parent may provide transportation to a public specific bus stop on an existing route of the receiving district, school or district. The district shall provide the parents with information regarding transportation options. And this bill, effective January 1st, 2026, allows parents to send their children to public schools outside of their resident district by making all New Hampshire public schools open enrollment schools. It is not possible to predict how many students may seek to enroll in a school outside their resident district as allowed by this bill, and therefore it is not possible to predict this bill's impact on state aid programs or local school district revenues or expenditures. So I would highlight again, January 1st of next year, midway through, this opens unlimited enrollment with very little guidance from the state. I would say recklessly ambiguous in its definitions. There's no talk about teacher to student ratios. There's very little given on what they are going to force us. So potentially thousands of dollars per student that we're going to be burdened with very little recourse. I'm not sure legally where this will end up, but there are huge implications not only for the performance of Swayze, but financially for people living in Brentwood. Also, this, 20%, to me, this could look like surrounding communities an opportunity to cut their school budgets because, hey, they only have to give out 80% of their budget while they can push kids off on other districts. It seems like a great opportunity for other communities to cut their budgets to send them to Swayze, which is a real gem. HB 115, education freedom accounts, there isn't much additional to say there. Removing tax or income limits on that. Again, I will read, as students potentially leave traditional district schools and join the EFA program, districts may feel pressure to reduce their local expenditures to better fit the reduced population served. It is unknown the impact this would have on local expenditures, but this could potentially result in an indeterminable decrease. Again, we're told by the state, next year, extreme cuts, expect it, make it. Yet these very important pieces of legislation targeted at our public education, well, who knows the tax impact? Tens, hundreds of millions of dollars per year. To me, it's a dangerous precedent. Also, there's very little oversight. We sit here, all of you give up your time to make all of this information public, school board, budget committee, select board. These funds that are taken from taxpayer money have very little oversight in these private institutions. So really very concerning overall. Also, I would mention that both of these are in HB2, which is the House budget. They are not being voted on individually. They are already included in the House budget, which is sitting at the Senate right now. So there is no opportunity other than amending the budget or voting it down really to stop these at this point. So I would urge anyone interested to contact Senator Gannon or preemptively the governor. The other item that has made its way through the House, HB 675, which is an imposed tax cap on school board funding. So based on consumer price index of the previous 3 years, the state will be basically overriding local control, which I think we find very important here. We sit through hours of town meeting. we sit through hours of school board meetings. To have that taken away, I think is very damaging. Also includes a 2/3 majority required to override any of that cap, which is extremely concerning. You can look up how your House representatives voted on this. I will just say it's not fiscally, it's not how I would expect it to play out, but please look those up and reach out to your representatives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments and that information. Yeah, some of that's kind of troubling. Any other comments, Chad?
Can you just hit the button? Thank you.
Ched Miller over on Dudley Road. I'd offer my help on your benefit issues. I've got 47 years in HR, the last 34 in benefits. Started out at Ford Motor Company, ended up with Raytheon Company. Quick answer to your concern about not having medical if they do things to shut down that trust group. It's simple. You just use contributions and buy it on the exchanges, the Affordable Care Act exchanges. But
Who just
I'd be happy to consult. Don't want to run anything.
and that's where the problem lies.
The next comment is not as enjoyable, but we were at the town meeting where we voted to put in the 4% tax cap. And, I heard various select people say, we're sensitive to the population. We want to make sure that people can afford to live here. And I heard somewhere along the line that somebody, a selectman, not this year, but previous years, I think, said, well, if you can't afford to, taxes, get out of town. That's not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is we had to figure out a way for all of this to be able to stay here if we want to stay here. And, it's to sit there and say, the 4% cap's a big issue. We aren't going to be able to live with it. We can't afford the bond. I mean, I've worked for 47 years in corporations that we had the profit motive. We had to make enough money so we didn't go out of business. And, 2 years before my last year, they came in and said in January, oh, welcome to the new year. You got to take 10% out of your budget. But that wasn't the first time. That's probably the 15th time that happened to me during my career. So it's doable. It's just kind of like the stages of grief. First, you sit there and think about all the things you're going to lose, not be able to do. Then you get mad and you say things you shouldn't say. But in the end, you do it because it's doable. My experience has been, and it may sound disingenuous, but work takes up the time available to do it in. And my example is, since I don't work anymore, I don't get virtually anything done. My time goes real wide. And it's so easy to put things off now. It's really kind of pitiful. But it's, I hope we don't get to a scenario where the select board says to the budget committee, well, we can't do it for 4%, so you guys figure out where to cut it. That's not what your past chairman on the select board said. Well, the legislative body said we should spend this much, we did. So what are you complaining about? Well, the legislative body has now said we want to limit it to 4%. And hopefully everybody in the various boards embraces that. And there was a time when I was on the budget committee, and I was also on the school board for a number of years. And you can't make everybody happy. But I think what we ought to do as a goal is make sure the people who live here, and particularly people who've been in here and they're probably the people with less money, who've been here for a long time can stay here. And the question I was going to ask, and it's late now, but as you'll hear requests from your various departments of what we got to have to get this done. The other question that I wrestled with is how do we make sure that the people can afford it? And that's the question I really wanted to ask the budget committee today. What do you look at? You know, and some of the things I thought about is you go to the census. From the census, you can find out what our median income is, what our average income is. You can look at the various sizes and costs of our houses and figure out, you know, in round numbers, probably when people buy houses, they can afford 3 times what they currently make. At least that's what it was when I bought a house. And that's been a while. But what would you look at as committee folks to ensure that any budget you bring forward not only meets the needs of the people who work for Brentwood, but also for the people who have to pay for those services you want to buy? Because I think it's you know, in business we had to take care of our people, but we had to sell a product that people wanted to buy it from. And you were constantly balancing that and trying to figure out how to make your budgets produce the outcome that meets the people you want to keep hired and the customers you want to have buy from. So, I mean, it's, you know, we have services here that, you know, are quite remarkable. We're a small town. You know, I know in town meetings, somebody said, well, you know, if you're waiting for an ambulance, you don't want to wait a long time. The fact of the matter is we will never have the services that Boston has, or even Exeter, because we are a small town. We have limitations. Things that step in there are mutual aid programs with the fire department, with the EMTs, et cetera. And, you know, look at the schools. I mean, it's, you know, we have a spectacular school system. Both my kids have doctorates, and, you know, they went to Swayze when Swayze was just the size of that big square building, not any of the stuff out back. You know, then they went into Exeter for intermediate school, and then they went into Exeter for high school, and then they went to, you know, UConn, and the other one went to Plymouth, but then they went to Dartmouth, and the other one went to pharmacy school associated with Harvard. And that kind of broke me. But I think that's the goal. And, you know, if you want to comment, I'd be delighted to hear, how do you make sure that people here in our town can afford what we do? Because if they can't, it's just like a business that spends money and goes out of business. And we can't just assume the next group is going to be able to reach into their pocket and pay for all this. So, if you want to respond or think about it.
I mean,
I think it's an important one to think about.
I can respond as an individual select board member about how I think about it as just myself, only having done this for 1 year officially. The way I see it is we present a budget, the budget committee presents a budget, and then the people who show up at meeting are they spend the changes, increase literally forever have been the will of the people. Do I think that we could maybe provide the people more information? Absolutely. I think I was talking about, I don't think I talked about this in the meeting. I looked up for the last, I think, 6 or 7 years, whether or not the townspeople would have been able to vote for the budgets that they voted for with these rules, and they would have for all of the years except for 1 year when we had a bond. But that tells me that we're presenting something that the people want, because if they didn't want it, they could vote it down, change it. The other thing that I've been looking at is the perception of how much people's taxes have gone up versus the reality of how much they've gone up because of the first bill, second bill problem situation that we have. So sometimes people get their second bill and think their taxes went up by that much, but it's just balancing out the first bill. And the reason people pay more in taxes is because your house is worth more. It's not necessarily that we're asking for more. Overall, the tax rates haven't changed that much. The thing that has changed is how much your house is worth, which again is not something that we have control over, as will be evidenced by the revaluation that's coming up. The other thing, and I guess I only know statistically, I know that this is not necessarily exhaustive, but I know that out of all of the people in town, I think there's only 12 or 14 seniors that have applied for and qualify for the abatement, which means that those people have either income or see, my brain gets squishy. What's the other part? Income and savings above a certain limit. So that right there would then again indicate that they, on paper, are able to make those payments. And so I recognize that that might not be everybody, and there could be people that are not applying that could qualify, but we're trying to capture those people that maybe can't anymore. We're trying. So in those situations, when we have a senior tax credit, the rest of us pick up that slack. And I, for one, am happy to do it as a taxpayer. If there's somebody who is in a situation where they, need a tax credit because they can't make tax payments, then there's a system in place, and I'm happy as a non-qualifying resident to pick up the slack. So that's how I look at it. Again, after only one wild ride of a year. That's me.
Yeah, and as this committee, we've talked a number of times about various programs to help people. I think it's very important to continue that and those conversations. And we did with Jack as a chair, he led. We made some changes or proposed some changes to limits so that they were a little more realistic for people that were in need. So I think that as a community, it's important to continue to do that. In percentages of what the town budget represents versus the total, unfortunately, we have power only over a small portion of that. And if you, again, it only comes down to about 2 departments, right? 3. There's police, fire, and highway. And we're not building Taj Mahals with that. So it's a difficult situation with regards to what we can or cannot do. So I guess, the idea that 30 years ago, or not the idea that historically 30 years ago, there were more volunteers and people were lining up at a fire department, it doesn't happen anymore. And I don't know why, right? But that's definitely a change that is unfortunate for that department, right? And to hear Chief talk about on-call people and how that is drying out, and like on paper he has tens of volunteers, so to speak, but in reality only like 2 or 3 show up. What do we do as a town? I don't know, but it's a tough decision as part of as a member of a committee, as well as a person who lives at the town, right? Because I understand that we are not Boston, and I don't expect the ambulance to be there in 10 minutes, but 40 minutes might be a little too much as well. So that scares me personally sometimes, because if somebody in need of that help, I don't know what to do, right? So I don't know, it's a tough one, but it's also felt personally.
Well, I mean, Mr. Miller, I'd just say that the 4% cap was voted by the 3/5 majority. So the town of Brentwood, that includes this budget committee, we are going to learn to work and thrive in that environment. And I kind of mentioned the words strategically plan and prioritize, because I think when you were talking about in your business experience, I'm sure myself included and others on this board have that same experience where you can't do everything with everybody in one year. And I'm not saying whether that has or has happened in the past. I'm just saying that with the 4% cap, we're going to have to think about what are we investing in 2026, and then maybe we can do something in 2027, 28, 29, right? Like it's just going to have to become ingrained and part of the process on the budget committee as well as the select board. And I think it's going to have to trickle down to each of the department heads as well, where they're going to have to learn to, when the budget committee, and I think as a group, I see us as deciding, okay, where are we going to invest this year? What are the priorities going to be this year? Because we can't do everything for everybody. And that might be new to some folks in Brentwood, I don't know. But I don't know if I'm answering your question or giving you any sort of comfort, but I just think that the voters voted a 4% tax cap, and it is going to force us to decide what are the things that we are going to invest in for the 2026 budget. And not every department is going to be able to get what it is that they want or need that year. I think that's just going to be the financial fiscal truth. And I know I heard that talking to folks when I was running for this seat, that they felt they weren't being listened to. So, and that you know, that things were not being prioritized. So I heard that loud and clear, and I think we are going to be forced to do that. And I look forward to working with this group as well as the select board on doing that this year.
I think the fear, though, at least mine as an individual and not a member of this committee or any, is that what happens, so I think that the general feeling or understanding of many people would be that it's 4% on total, and we only have control over the town, right? So that's a small portion of total. So what happens is, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but to your point, like if we get flooded with students from other districts, for example, right, come January 1, what does it do to us in Brentwood? That's really scary to me right now, like in what happens like to the portions of our tax bill that we have no control over as this committee, right, and as select board. Like what does it mean to us as taxpayers? Does it mean that then we have to eliminate the town budget altogether? Do we have to close? Like, you know, are we not going to have any police or fire? That's the scary part, right? So it's a 4%, and I think that in terms of controlling the town's budget under 4%, that could be manageable, and you can plan.
I don't think Swayze's included in the 4%.
No.
It's not.
tax cap.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? So if we don't have schools
Oh,
in
that like
cap,
people are under the impression that
So
it
the
can't
peop-
go up more than
Oh.
4%,
Right, so we
and
can
then maybe
control-
the schools go up 10.
right, like we can control town, but what happens if everything else goes 20% up? Do we eliminate town budget altogether to, like, and even then, it's not gonna be.
No.
It's still gonna be then 16%, right? So that's the scary part for me, that the understanding of what was voted for, because the 4% of town is manageable, and, however difficult it is, you can plan, you can do, to Jim's point, you could plan that this year you're gonna work on this department and next year on that department, and you can work as you would at home, right? This year you do the roof, next year you fix up something else, but what happens if everything else goes out of proportion? What do we do? And that's something that I am personally petrified about, because I don't have an answer to that at all. Like,
I mean, the solution on that one too is you can put caps on the school side now too.
We can't.
we
This-
can't, right?
this
It's a
board-
district.
This board
The
can.
town
Right.
would have to do it.
Yeah.
The voters.
But also would have to be number of towns. It's not just one town, right? We are part of district. So, and then if we're not part of district, then what it would mean for us to educate, do we then send our students elsewhere? I don't know, right? Like, so it's a more complex, I guess it's a very complex situation that
Not
we're all
easy.
in. Yeah,
What
but in
it's
terms of
supposed to be.
town, like, that's manageable. Like, if it's just the town and 4% cap and the voters voted, yes, that's manageable, it's plannable, it's everything else that is not in our, like, maybe it's in our power if we reach out to representatives and to state and be more vocal but even then, it's like the rest of the state that decides, and it's,
Yeah, that's why the guy who's on the select board who wants to have the state pay for everything. When you start paying for things, they're going, they're gonna give you money for nothing.
Yeah.
Chad, thank you for, wow, that's loud.
You got very close. You got right up on it.
Chad, thank you for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts, and David, you as well. Chad, I do agree that we need to, figure out what our priorities really are going to be, and I hope that under this cap, we have to. We don't have to have a choice. We have to figure that out, but I do thank you for coming, all four of you, and hope to see you next month and the month after that, because, yep, but your input is very important, and we do want to hear from you, even though I tried to close the meeting without
We
listening to
frequently
you.
don't hear from anybody.
No.
So honestly, please, thank you for coming and telling us how you're feeling, because often we're just by ourselves
Yes.
talking about what we think, and we have no input from anyone.
So thank you.
Okay, anyone else in the audience want to speak?
I'd like to note that the gentleman volunteered to consult on
I wrote
very,
that. I already have Ched's
very
name and phone
important
number, so I put down he's a healthcare expert, and we'll be talking to him.
Can I just make, and I really don't want this to extend, but I really appreciate your question. I think that in a very concise, as much as I can, even though my name is Gabby, I think Brentwood is in a really interesting and unique place, because I know from my experience when I moved here 6 years ago, we bought in Brentwood because we couldn't afford Exeter, and now I'm always on Zillow still, no plans on moving, but the 55 and older community is like over $630,000 for a 2-bedroom house or something. So it's really a unique and it's never not a unique time, but I think that with the statistics that we have, and I know I brought this up before, and I made no friends doing it, but we are in the top 10 household income in New Hampshire. And if you multiplied 154,000 times 3 in your example, like, you can't afford a house if the median household income in Brentwood is $154,464 based on 5-year data from the American Community Survey from 2018 to 2022. You multiply that by 3, which is your example from before, it's $463,000. And there's
Buy a house for that.
nothing in Brentwood for $463,000. And so even though we're in the top 10, it doesn't mean anything's affordable right now. And I think that we couldn't live here if we couldn't afford be living in our house if we made $154,000. And so I don't have an answer, except that as a committee, I hope that we're committed to open discussion about the needs of the community. And I do think that often we hear from one portion of the population, and I know that there are other portions of the population that have certain expectations because they might have moved here and bought a $1.2 million house because they couldn't afford the $1.8 million house in Exeter, And so I think that there's always going to be a balance. And I think open communication is the only way to move forward, between different perspectives. And I think that that's really important. So thank you.
Okay, so,
As quick as
no, that was good, thank you. No one else from the public? Then we'll close public comments. And now you can make your,
Now I make my motion to adjourn.
second it so quickly.
you have a motion, Michelle, seconded
I
by
wasn't on the
Letty,
motion.
to adjourn. All in
I'm not gonna
favor?
heard it.
Aye. All opposed?
Thank
You're done.
you.
Okay,
Good
thank you,
night.
everyone. Have a good night.
Dan, can you just
my
just
God.
confirm your
Okay.
contact info down
Sweat
the
it
bottom? I
out.
just don't have your
need
cell phone
workout
number.
time. Why?
I think it's, you might,
No,
so there's a vent
warm.
right there. If somebody else can
Oh my God.
definitely. So this is meetings where I was like watching the. This is a wonky time of year.
Thank you.
5 wasn't close. Hit it even up.
Melting.